And I'm pleased to announce this is the 122nd committee meeting. So, we have the quorum, so I'll just call the meeting to order and remind members in regard to mobile phones that they should be switched off. And also, if anyone has any relevant financial or other interests in relation to today's business, if they could declare those. And thirdly, if you have a tablet device, could you make sure that the volume is off? Okay. With regards to apologies, we have apologies from David Hilditch and Gordon Dunn, one of whom is away and the other is on another committee that coincides with this, but that will be rearranged or resolved when the other committee changes its day very soon. Are there any other further apologies?
Yes, Chair. Could I, it's not an apology, but can I propose that following the reshuffle and your appointment, and I congratulate you on that, that Mr Dunn and his appointment as Deputy Chair of the Committee, that the letter be sent to our immediate past Chair, Michelle McAleen, for the immense contribution she has made to the Committee and in terms of her work representing the Committee across Northern Ireland and beyond over the last number of years, and also to Willie Irwin, who's obviously moved on from being Vice Chair of the Committee to Chair of Agriculture. And I think it would be appropriate that letters would be sent to both of them.
Members agree to that? Send the letters. Thank you. Yes, Michelle was very assiduous in her work. There's no doubt about that. Serves a letter of appreciation. The next item then is the draft minutes of the meeting on the 18th of September. And first of all, could I have your agreement that they're an accurate record of the proceedings that day? Please? Yep. Great. I'll sign those then. Next item then is the decal briefing on October monitoring. About which there's some slight difficulty since we don't actually.
No, we have no paper.
No paper. So we'll see what they arrive with.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask, how on earth are we meant to make comment on a paper that we haven't yet seen, and therefore?
Can you just hold on for a minute until we? Thank you. You just hold on for a moment outside until we complete the discussion here.
Sorry, thanks. A paper that we haven't yet seen, so we'll have to read, if indeed they have a paper with them, and then ask questions. I just don't think that's good governance, and I really do think that perhaps they should go away, and when they're prepared and ready, and we have a paper in front of us, that we do it then.
Kathy, yes.
Chair, I don't tend to agree either. I think that it's, I know that we went through yesterday in another committee and we drove down into figures and came up with alternatives and all the rest of it. So I think it's not good practice, and I really would call on you to make a comment. Right.
It's been proposed then that we defer this until we get and request immediately an explanation as to why the figures weren't produced, why the paper hasn't been here. I understand other committees have them,
yes,
and have been able to scrutinise them. And
I make that point because the last time we had them in front of, there were questions asked, and I know I asked questions, of which the answers to have never been furnished with.
well, could we actually, if there were questions asked, is that the last monitoring round?
Yes.
You're talking about?
And which was delayed?
which was today.
And those questions then were not answered?
No.
Well, I think we may look back and just.
But perhaps that they look. I mean, I don't remember the exact wording of them, but I know I and others asked questions. I never certainly got the answers to those questions, and perhaps, instead of treating this committee with scant disregard, civil servants might provide us and furnish us with those answers, and allow us then to make judgments on that. Because we're absolutely operating in a vacuum here.
So, if I interpret what you're saying, the two elements to it, what you're proposing is, first of all, just in retrospect there, that the request be made for answers to previous questions that were unanswered.
Can I just, sorry, would the clerk, has he received any of those? You remember those questions being asked, and they were.
I Chair, we have a hand start of that. We can go back to that. I think part of the issue was also the delay in decisions being made on the monitoring round, which went into the summer, but questions were asked and we haven't had that response, so we will follow that up because we have the hand start.
You would have thought over the summer the civil servants would have got an answer put together.
Yep.
Chair, what we've done previously is reconvened another meeting to do this. Now, we'd probably be having to look at doing that on Monday or Tuesday, but if members are in agreement, we will talk to the department about doing that.
Members agree then that we reconvene on Monday or Tuesday? Yes.
One other way around it would be to agree today that the 15 million of the decal budget be ring fenced and let them go away and deal with that
For the arts.
for the arts.
Well, I think, first thing is we'll get them back on Monday and scrutinise
Okay.
them. It'll be an interesting meeting, I'm sure.
Do you want to bring that down?
Just so you can pass the message on that. And also, as well, so the message is made clear, could we actually write to the department stating our disappointment and our concern that the information was not with us at all. Wasn't a case of not being in time, it's they're not up there at all. And we'll get a suitable time then, Monday or Tuesday. Okay. Moving on to, we're now on to the Guard Fisheries Bill.
Checking if they're official.
Oh, right, okay.
We just...
They're obviously a bit, or being called a bit earlier than otherwise.
Business round.
Okay.
Okay, what we do then is we move to item 7.
Okay, we'll move forward to item number 7. There, matters arising towards the end. No, we haven't got the dark. Right. Okay. In terms of number 7 there on the agenda, the first item is referring members to the correspondence tracker at page 222. Here, 222, detailing outstanding correspondence. And first one there, page 223, is the response from the DCAM Minister regarding funding for the East Belfast Art Strategy.
We also have a reference to the June monitoring round, Chair.
Okay.
Which highlighting.
Okay, if you look there on 222 and 223. On 222, you have outstanding correspondence, actually. Yes, correspondence track there. It's interesting there. If we could turn it to 222, yeah, thanks. First one there is the leaflet collation of information and delivery. There was correspondence there going back to March. Long time. We haven't had any response to that. So I think it's, I think members agree that we write and remind them that that is outstanding. That's 6 months. Well, the civil service can be a bit slow at times, but I think 6 months is a very long time.
In fact, on the issue of the one there in the Milk Cup, we discussed that recently at our meeting in Fermanagh. I think we discussed it. So, I mean, we've actually discussed that again, and still no correspondence.
So all of those items of correspondence go back. The last one there would be July, the 8th of July, the Ulster GAA. So if we just send a letter to them and expressing, I think, extreme disappointment that letters are taking so long, because it makes the work of the committee almost impossible if you don't have answers to correspondence after 6 months. Bizarre.
Chair, one of them has now come in. The funding for the East Belfast Art Strategy is in the pack.
Okay.
But the others
Yes, the others. Okay, and then the next page, opposite that, 223, is the funding for the East Belfast Art Strategy. They have then. Okay. We'll just finish off this. Are members content with that response there? The money coming from the lottery fund, the 59,500. Okay. Content with that? And that's that. Maybe, do we call in the fisheries people now or finish this off?
Finish Manager Rising, and then we can
Just doing the, yeah, okay. The next item there is the Minister's response, page 225, regarding the redevelopment of Belfast Central Library there. That's the question, the written question there. Estimated cost delivering option set out 43.16 million over 3 years, higher than the previous 30 to 35. Officials reviewed the business case and provide detailed written response to Libraries NI, and they're reviewing their business case. So that will be back with a revised form by November. It's a very important facility resource for Northern Ireland.
Chair, the committee had visited. Members will recall some members had made a couple of visits, and the committee had a presentation on this.
Right.
That was going back to summer last year. The committee had been very heavily involved in pressing for the redevelopment of the library, and initially there had been an expectation that the business plan would go in last October. I think there were initial discussions with DCAL, and that was delayed. So this is a further delay because the cost estimates are so much higher than the original plan. But as the chair has indicated, the new submission is hoped to be early November. So the committee, I think, could possibly look at asking for an update on that in the new year. But members will note or want to note that it is about a year since the expectation had been that the business case would be completed. Thank you, Chair.
So anyway, we've got an update on that. The next one then was C, table letter of congratulations from the Minister to Linfield Ladies Football Club. Table, right, okay, and that's really all there under matters rising. But just to ask the clerk there, in terms of the time for the department to respond to correspondence from the committee, what is is there a set recommended time?
Chair, the usual expected protocol, generally between departments and ourselves and departments within the civil service, is 10 working days. Sometimes by agreement that can be extended if there are specific issues or difficulties and so on, but the general agreed or recognised turnaround time is 10 working days. We usually will put a response by on our correspondence to stakeholders of the department or other departments. Sometimes we will extend it beyond the original 10 days because we're aware that there is a large-scale collation exercise or officials have already been in touch to talk about issues that there are. So each piece of our correspondence does have a response date. And as I say, sometimes it's not the 10 days, sometimes it's a little bit longer when we feel that there is scope or reason for that. But traditionally, the protocol has always been 10 days, 10 working days.
Okay, that's good, thank you. And sorry, just on that point, were any follow-up letters sent reminding them of those?
We provide the correspondence tracker on a weekly basis in the pack, and members will then decide whether they're content, if there are issues, to let things last a bit longer, or if they want to specifically highlight or remind. We don't do it as a default. Again, okay. we let members discuss what they want to do with those, but it comes in on a weekly basis.
Okay. Well, we'll jump back now to the DARD item because the officials have arrived. So that's the briefing there, page 139, and the consultation and policy proposals for a new fisheries bill at page 142. So Fergus Devitt, Seamus Connor and Liam Devlin are coming in now. Good morning. And Liam Devlin there, Inland Waterways Unit, Seamus Connor, Chief Fisheries Officer, and Fergus Devitt, the Director of Sports, Museums and Recreation. And welcoming Fergus to his new post and wishing you well in that. Could I ask you then just to make an opening statement on the input from DCAL to the Fisheries Bill, which is currently out for consultation.
Chair, thank you very much. I'll make a few brief opening comments, and I'll pass to Liam to say a little bit more. As you've said, I'm the new director and welcome this opportunity to engage with the committee at the earliest possible chance. My responsibilities as well as fisheries include sports museums and libraries. I understand that the committee has already received a copy of the public consultation on the decal proposals, and those proposals form part of a wider review of the Fisheries Act, which is being taken forward by a DARD build team. And that provides an opportunity for decal to take forward a number of high priority amendments to the Act. It provides an opportunity to modernise enforcement activity and to realign the 1966 Act with its obligations under EU directives such as the Water Framework Directive and the EU Services Directive. And the overall aim is to ensure that our powers under the 1966 Act remain fit for purpose, and that decal has the flexibility to respond to evolving fisheries management practice and its EU obligations. The decal proposals really focus on 4 key areas. Those are fixed penalties, protection and free passage of fish, transfer of powers relating to fishing permits from DARD to decal, and streamlining of fish dealers' licence applications. Liam is responsible for the processing of the legislative programme within decal, and he can now quickly take the committee through a bit more detail in the consultation paper.
Thanks, Fergus. The Fisheries Act was originally designed to extend the functions of the Ministry of Agriculture in relation to both sea and inland fisheries, and to make provision for the development and improvement of fisheries. The 1999 Department's Transfer and Assignment of Functions Order transferred functions in relation to salmon inland fisheries to decal. Responsibility for sea fisheries remains with DARD. In 2013, DARD established a build team to undertake a review of the 66 Act with regard to sea fisheries and aquaculture. With ministerial approval, decal have been liaising with the DARD team to assess the opportunities for decal to incorporate some essential amendments to inland fisheries legislation. In doing so, decal recognises the need to amend legislation to address stakeholders' concerns about the effectiveness of the Fisheries Act in light of changes in fisheries management practice and environmental and European obligations. After consultation with stakeholders through the Salmon and Inland Fisheries Forum, the Departments of Justice and DARD and the Lochs Agency, the following decal proposals have been agreed and included in the public consultation which was launched by DARD on the 18th of August 2014. First of all, fixed penalties. Decal proposed that the Fisheries Act is amended to include new powers, allowing the Department to issue fixed penalty notices for minor fishing offences. The rationale is to modernise enforcement activity to ensure that it is proportionate to the seriousness of any given offence. It is important that the Department is seen to be an effective and efficient regulator, that the burden on regulated stakeholders is kept low, and that resources and efforts are targeted towards those offences which pose the greatest risk to inland fisheries. The Department is therefore proposing to introduce a fixed penalty regime for low-impact angling offences, particularly those which take place on stocked fisheries. This will have the effect of decriminalising angling activity so that angling errors need not end up in the criminal justice system. This will free up valuable resources to allow the Department to focus on the protection of wild fisheries, the management of commercial fishing activity, and to extend its community outreach programmes. Regulations would determine the type of offences which would be within scope, the levels of penalties, issuing authorities, early payment schemes, processes for payment and review mechanisms. The Lochs Agency is also proposing to introduce similar powers which will harmonise arrangements in both the decal and Lochs Agency jurisdictions. We also have proposals for the protection and free passage of fish. The Fisheries Act has been in place for nearly 50 years. Some of its provisions have been superseded by European directives, particularly the Water Framework Directive, which emphasise the need to mitigate against barriers to free passage of fish by carefully managing both natural and artificial in-river structures. Considerable work has been undertaken by decal in respect of salmon conservation and the establishment of measures for the recovery of the European eel stock. However, more can be done. The current Fisheries Act needs modification to conform to the Water Framework Directive to ensure free passage of fish, and the Habitats Directive to ensure that salmon as a protected species receives adequate protection. The Department has proposed a series of measures to further protect fish within their freshwater range, so that they, particularly adult salmon and eels, can migrate both up and down rivers and juveniles can reach the sea safely. The detail of the proposals is within the consultation papers, but essentially include the following. There will be a new requirement that the Department's permission is required before removing any material from the bed of a river or lake to protect the spawning grounds of fish. This requirement currently only applies to rivers. New powers to remove both natural and man-made obstructions in rivers to allow free passage of fish. Currently, legislation only permits the removal of natural obstructions. Current legislation places an onus on dam owners to provide and maintain fish passage in river dams for salmon, trout and eels. We are proposing that this is widened to include lampreys. We also find difficulty in passing such barriers. We are also proposing a clarification of powers in respect of fish passage on dams, regardless of when they are built. Currently, dams built before 1842 are exempt unless they have gone extensive modification. While plans for the construction of a fish passage in a dam must be approved by the Department, there is no requirement for approval for dam removal. Such approval should be mandatory so that the impact on habitat and fish movement is carefully managed. The Department has also proposed additional powers to remove dams and to enter land to do so, where the owner of a dam does not comply with the notice to provide a fish pass in writing. This would strengthen the Department's enforcement action in this regard. We also propose to replace the current weekend closure requirement for mill sluices to any 24-hour period defined by the Department. This will provide a more flexible arrangement tailored to the requirements of mill owners and the Department. Currently, Section 59(1) of the Act sets out the requirements affecting watercourses which take water from a salmon river. These include the placing of gratings at the entrance and exit of watercourses, the dimensions of such gratings, and a further requirement to place wire lattices to protect fry at certain times of the year. It is proposed that grate spacings now should not exceed 10 millimetres so as to protect small fish descending the river. There are a number of other minor amendments which will address anomalies in the management of the Department's public angling estate and modernise requirements regarding access to fish dealers' licences as required by the EU Services Directive. Firstly, the transfer of Section 7A of the Fisheries Act from DARD to DCAL. Schedule 1 of the transfer of function orders lists those functions transferring from the then Department of Agriculture to DCAL, and it included sections of the Fisheries Act relating to salmon and inland fisheries. However, it would appear, for reasons unknown, that in transferring sections 1A to 7, section 7A was omitted. Sections 1A to 7 describe the Department's functions with regard to the promotion of angling, acquisition and development of waters for angling, the development of derelict waters for angling, and the compilation of an angling guide. Section 7A would empower DCAL to issue permits for the public angling estate and would make it an offence to fish the public angling estate without a permit or to falsify such permits. It would seem reasonable to assume that Section 7A should also have transferred to DCAL in 1999. We're also proposing to remove the requirement for a Justice of the Peace approval to approve a dealer's licence application. Part 7 of the Fisheries Act describes the restrictions on dealings in salmon, trout and eels. Section 114 describes the application process for a fish dealer's licence and the requirement for the applicant to obtain a certificate signed by a Justice of the Peace to support their application for such a licence. The EU Services Directive was brought into UK law by the provision of services regulations in 2009, and that directive is aimed at opening up the internal market for service provision in the EU by removing regulatory and administrative barriers that make it difficult for service providers to trade across borders. It is proposed that the requirement for a Justice of the Peace to support such an application is removed, as this may cause difficulties for those non-UK applicants who operate different legal systems. It also would facilitate an uninterrupted online application system, which is another requirement of the directive. That is a brief summary of the DCAL legislative proposals currently out to consultation. Consultation launched on the 18th of August and has been circulated to a wide range of DCAL stakeholders, advertised in 3 main newspapers, and is available on the DCAL Angling website. It will close on the 10th of November 2014. The DCAL proposal has been subject to an equality impact screening test, and the proposals are believed to be compatible with the Convention on Human Rights and to have no differential impact on Section 75 groups. We've also carried out a partial regulatory impact assessment. There may be some impacts on companies which now need to seek DCAL permission before extracting material from the bed of lakes such as Lough Neagh. The new proposals also affect those who own dams or working mills by introducing a range of measures which enhance fish passage as required by the Water Framework Directive. It is not envisaged these impacts will have significant financial implications. The draft regulatory impact assessment forms part of the public consultation, and respondents will have an opportunity to comment on the details and those assumptions. As the proposals may have implications for the activities of a number of departments, our Minister, jointly with the Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development, has written to Executive Ministers to inform them of the joint public consultation. Following full consideration of the consultation responses, the departments will seek the agreement of the Executive to the final policy proposals before beginning formal drafting of a bill. During the consultation period, we will follow up on informal discussions held with some key stakeholders during policy development. We will, of course, apprise the committee of the outcome of the consultation and the Minister's proposed way forward once the consultation is concluded and responses have been analysed. We are now happy to take members' questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Could I just ask, first of all, angling is very important in terms of tourism, and the good fishing waters here are a major attraction. The worst case scenario is where you have to turn visitors away. To what level do you think that the huge volume of angling tourists visiting Northern Ireland every year, how do you take that into account? What do you think the proposals will have by way of impact in terms of modernisation of enforcement?
If I could make a comment, Chair, and then I'll pass to my colleagues who are clearly more knowledgeable about this area than I would be. I mean, one of the issues within the legislation proposals, as I understand it, is to decriminalise some minor offences, and that might actually impact on some tourists who may be fishing in areas where they don't realise that they have a licence, for example, or don't need a licence. So rather than take them through a criminal process, a fixed penalty or something might be a much easier way to deal with that. So that might be one potential benefit around it, and there may well be others. I could imagine.
I say maybe just pick up Fergus there. Yeah, one of the biggest difficulties we have is in terms of people fishing without licences. Most of the offences we take are for that particular. Most of the prosecution cases are for that offence. So the decriminalisation of this is a very key step we see. We're taking this forward on a number of fronts. One in terms of educating stakeholders, people who are domestic, living here, but also, as Fergus has mentioned, the big issues for people who come who don't know the rules and regulations. The fact that it's a fixed penalty reduces the impact, if you like, on potential impact for those people who may be discovered not fishing. I mean, in many cases, we'll probably direct them to get a licence and a permit. But we probably face criticism for our domestic anglers saying, you know, how come you treat other tourists differently than you treat us? So in terms of equity, it means that we're applying the same brush across everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Number of people there with questions. Rosie McCorley.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. You mentioned Section 7A, then the omission of it. What does that mean in practical terms then for local anglers, that the fact that that was omitted?
Yes, well, 7A of the Act gives us a statutory right to issue permits for the public angling state and to create an offence of falsifying such permits as well. In terms of the management of our public angling estate, we still have powers under the Fisheries Act to prosecute anyone who is fishing on the public angling estate without a permit. And that will be done by means of taking an offence of trespass on a fishery which we own. So we still have powers under the Fisheries Act. This will just give us additional powers to actually issue permits and then creates an offence then of not actually having a permit as such issued by the Department to fish public angling in state waters.
Okay, thank you. And the Chair mentioned the impacts on tourism. What measures have you taken to ensure that people don't fall foul inadvertently? Because what we don't want to be doing is to have people coming here expecting to have a good time and take part in their sport and then find that through just not knowing they've ended up with a fixed penalty. So what way do you get that information out?
Yeah, I can pick it up. All our waters have signage to them with main entrances. So the signs are displaying that you need it. You need a permit and a licence along with it. We also attend shows both in the UK and in Ireland and across in Europe as well. Again, we're getting the message out about what's available in terms of angling, what you need in terms of the requirements. The website carries those details as well, and obviously in terms of educating, we'll also inform boat owners and people like that who are taking tourists out of the need to ensure that people are properly have the proper licence and permit with them.
Okay. And just a general question, what poses the greatest risk to inland fisheries?
Well, I suppose really the whole emphasis of us in terms of making sure that we have fixed penalty notices is to differentiate between those offences which are very serious and those which are, if you like, are minor. And that's the whole idea, is that we're not putting somebody who doesn't have a licence on the same scale as somebody who's maybe carrying out illegal netting, which is a very strong impact on fish stocks present. So that's the rationale behind the current proposal to have fixed penalty notices as opposed to treating them all with the same brush.
And what about pollution and the massive kills that result from pollution?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Northern Environment Agency are it's really under their remit in terms of pollution, but we have a memorandum of understanding with them where we assist them in investigating pollution incidents, and obviously the last thing we want to see is fish being killed. So we will assist them in terms of stakeholder engagement, of advising farmers in terms of DARD officers as well, as the steps they can take, obviously in terms of when they're doing silage or whatever it happens to be, any activity that might impact on fish stocks. So that education is absolutely critical, and particularly when you have periods of low water, as we've had over the last summer months.
Thank you.
Thanks.
William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. Can I ask you, in terms of your department, what's the working relationship like with Waterways Ireland?
Waterways Ireland, we would probably have some association with them, because obviously one of the big problems we faced in the past would have been weed down in Lough Erne. So Waterways Ireland at that time and currently have capability with cottonweeds, so we would have had some sort of liaison with them in terms of cottonweed. I know we've had some initial discussions with them to try and improve the current relationship we have with them. We do also have competitions where Waterways Ireland will provide some of the funding for it, and we will also provide, if you like, staff in kind to assist at these competitions. So I probably agree that the relationship could be better than it is currently, but we're certainly starting to engage better with them.
Do you think the relationship is, in terms of it being better, is it sufficiently joined up in terms of the governance of the waterways? Because I mean, I have concerns. The committee was there a couple of weeks ago today at their headquarters, which cost £13.5 million to build. And during the presentation we received from the Chief Executive, we were told that some of their jetties are crumbling and ready to collapse into Lough Erne. Now, when you spend £13.5 million on a building, and your jetties, for the foreign tourists that the chairman talked about, coming, that concerns me, I have to say. You know, how sufficiently joined up in the governance of the waterways are we that we can deal with these things collaboratively across government?
I know for
Well, I mean, obviously there's a number of agencies and organisations involved in the management of waterways, and it's something potentially now with me new into the post that I would want to look at to see how that governance between those agencies might be better enhanced, because clearly, if, you know, what you're saying is correct, then that's not a situation that is helpful.
I appreciate that, Fergus, and I wonder if in fact there are too many agencies involved, that perhaps things fall between stools. Another thing that worries me coming down the line is that I think Dawn Livingston told us that I think she's going to have to spend something like £3.3 million out of her budget on pensions for southern civil servants, and the knock-on effect that's going to have on our waterways as well, and the opportunity cost in terms of no investment. But you know, I would appreciate you looking at that, because that is something which I just find staggering, that you have this huge investment in capital for the state of the art, and it's a beautiful building, but then you have jetties that are rotting and collapsing into the loch. In terms of Loch Nay, we've had the cooperative here, and we've had the fishermen here. Have you had any conversations with them?
in terms of,
Well, you're aware there's an ongoing dispute there. As I say, we've had the co-op in front of us. We've been to the co-op. We've had the representatives from the fishermen, the permit holders here, and it's fair to say there's no meeting of minds on issues. I mean, has the department got actively involved in trying to get a resolution to that?
yeah, we met the co-op and we met the fishermen on a number of occasions. The big issue, I think, big difficulty around Lough Neagh is the fact that In terms of eels, we are bound by the international plan, the EU plan we have in place for it, and that does put a limit on the amount of effort that we can put into catching eels. One of the criticisms from the association, if you like, is the fact that there are a number of licences that are not extensively fished. Now, that's actually beneficial in the sense that it does allow that we can then meet our requirement to get 40% escapement. If all the fishermen were fishing to high intensity, it would be extremely difficult for them to make a living out of it. So it's actually beneficial, but the plan is quite clear, and the EU has made it clear that we cannot go above the current effort that we have. Having said that, we have had discussions with the co-op around the whole process of making sure that whenever somebody does apply for a licence or permit, in their case, that the exchange of letters is quite clear as to what the issue is and why they can or cannot grant that licence, and maybe there's need to improve on that there. These have been subject to a number of judicial reviews. I think they have been found in favour of the co-op in all cases. They have made a few suggestions, the court has made a few suggestions as to how they could improve on it, and my understanding is that the co-op have actually followed through on those.
When you say, Seamus, that maybe there's a need to improve, I mean, is the department actively working alongside both sides of the argument, if we can put it that way, to try and get a resolution?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big proposals we have for Lough Neagh is that we have a fisheries management plan in place for all the stocks, looking at how we manage them and looking at all the legislation around it. Part of that is stakeholder engagement. We're obviously engaging with stakeholders as we go along as to what should be in that plan. What are the issues people see on the ground? What are the issues around, for example, permitting of coarse fish, which doesn't happen currently. If you have a licence, anyone can go and buy a licence and fish for coarse fish on the loch. And issues around, for example, ensuring there are enough brown trout upstream in the streams. So we see that as a way, so certainly in terms of looking at how we manage an agreed management structure in place, a very modern one that is reflective of the needs for Lough Neagh, and the association will be part of that stakeholder engagement.
Would you have cause for optimism that they will be able to get a resolution to these?
We would certainly have cause for optimism in the sense that it should be very clear as to what the issues are on Lough Neagh, and there are certain steps we can take, but there are certain management restrictions that we need in place to ensure that fish stocks are properly managed and that we don't go over the 40% escapement.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Kathleen?
Thank you, gentlemen. And because it's broad, as I say, I broadly welcome the decal legislative proposals. I think we are. The 1966 Act did require some reform, and some of these steps that are proposed there will take that some way. The modernisation of enforcement is one, absolutely, and there isn't a loophole there that's been outstanding. But I think the second one was that the protection of the free passage of fish, and of course we have seen in recent years many more in-water structures appearing in terms of hydro schemes right across the board. I know in my own river, Chair, which is a Spate River, 26 miles, there are 13 approvals currently either passed or in the process on the main river, and quite a number of others on the tributaries. So it's a very worrying issue there. There's also a problem there in that there is not a design brief per se that does exist in the south, whereby there are guidelines by which people should build these schemes and build the fish passes as well, and that has caused issue in a number of river shipments, and I know you're aware of quite a few in my neck of the woods. I welcome the powers that the department have to actually remove these if they aren't correct. I think that's very, very welcome, and the addressing particularly of sand and gravel removal, including in Lough Neagh, which is an issue with the fishermen there, but also in other rivers as well. The section 7A1 as well there is also. I just wondered, just in terms of the free passage one, has there any work been done there? We've seen the issue in Ballyshannon back at Easter time, where 350,000 eels perished in a 2-day period.
Yeah.
Has there been any issue Seamus done to address those problems? I know that's an ESB issue, but that doesn't matter. Still affected the eel numbers in the Erne.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the issue with the Erne is obviously passage, both ways, both upstream and downstream. And currently we operate effectively a truck and transport operation, where as the juvenile eels, known as elvers, come upstream, they're taken out at Ballyshannon and our staff remove them and plant them into the upper Earn. On the way back down again, we're currently just actively catching silver eels, which are due to go to sea, so they're being caught and then trucked downstream of the dams as well. The issue was in relation to basically effectively protocols as to what happened during that. The loss of about 300,000 elvers. We have now agreed a protocol with the ESB and Fishers Ireland. We have identified very clearly what roles everyone has and what is expected of everyone, and that's been signed off by ourselves. Obviously, it will be subject to ministerial approval, but in terms of practical terms on the ground, we've agreed what steps need to be taken. It's rather unfortunate that the combination of circumstances, if you like, caused that one of the boxes wasn't checked, but however, we've put in place a very detailed protocol there, and we're satisfied with the current protocol. If it's applied, if it's maintained out there, should save any elvers.
But notwithstanding, Seamus, the events of Easter, there are ongoing issues about the passage of salmon, particularly. That they're being allowed to gather in the bins before they've been transferred, and they could injure themselves, UDN set in or whatever, and fish could be lost.
One of our things we're bringing in place is a fishery management plan for the Earn, and we've already had a number of discussions with ESB and Fishers Ireland. The big issue with the Earn is the fact that we have a significant number of fish that do come upstream, and it's very difficult to find out where these fish actually go. So in order for us to protect these fish, protect the habitat, we need to know that information. So what we're proposing is to look at the work that was done under the Earn programme back in the 90s, look at some of the recommendations coming out of that there, and most of them have actually been implemented. But to maybe look at a more detailed tagging study, which will allow us to track salmon coming in through the bottom dam, right there through Asroe, up to the top dam and on up into the loch itself. So that'll be co-joined effort with ourselves and the ESB and IFI, and we'll be incorporating details around that there as part of the fishery management plan. Obviously, we've engaged already with stakeholders, and we'll be engaging further with them before the draft plan, if you like, is presented for consultation.
Just one last one, Chair. She was over the summer. I met along with a number of angling groups and other interest parties with the Lochs Agency in looking at the issue of a design brief for hydro schemes and fish passes at hydro schemes. Is that work in hand?
The DOE Minister has proposed a working group on this issue. Our advice to people on fish passes is based on the Environment Agency manual, and it's something like that thickness. And it covers velocities and detailed investigations haven't been done. So that's the best option we have currently is to use that manual, and that's the one our technical assessment group use. We will certainly advise those who are proposing hydro schemes as to what is required of them even before they come to the planning stage or the abstraction licence application stage. So we do find that more and more abstractors are coming to us before they put on a planning application, so as to know what we will actually be looking for. And we obviously advise as part of the process, the whole process around planning, and we'll also advise the water abstraction process as well. So that's something that's taken forward. I think one of the issues has been in the past historically is that some of these things have been approved, and maybe the follow-up, the processes around that follow-up haven't been maintained. So we've tightened all that up.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Carol McKibben.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. Just to mention that there was a memorandum of understanding. Mr Humphreys had spoke about NI Waterways and the committee going there a few weeks back. And at their presentation, we talked about the removal of foreign species plants. And I was wondering, in the memorandum of understanding, is there any? Does it touch on the like of that in order to protect maybe the angling tourists coming and the walkways around it to be able to fish? Is there any?
Well, one of the common issues I suppose we have with Waterways Ireland was the issue of weeds, and in particular the weeds around our fishing stands. There are two different roles down there, albeit they're complementary to one another in terms of be it for anglers or for boating. So we will provide fishing stands, and we look after those and maintain them. The Waterways Ireland will look after, if you like, boat jetties, albeit some anglers may possibly use those as well. So we have, for example, used had a conjunctive programme cutting some of this weed to ensure that boats were able to get through some of the narrow areas. Invasives is a whole different arena because we now have things like red bloody shrimp down in Lough Erne, which is a new invasive. We're not sure what the impact's going to be. It may have an impact on pollen. We will liaise with other departments at the NEA, but have the lead in terms of invasives. But we certainly work together in terms of identifying where they are and what steps we can do in terms of removing them, or at least mitigating against their presence.
Okay, and would you have any communications with local government, like local councils across?
We have met the Fermanagh Council. They proposed a new angling strategy, so we've been in very early with them. We're consulting them with our fishery management plan because obviously the two have to come together. The big thing for us is, for any of this angling to go forward, we need to have the fisheries resource. So we need to engage with stakeholders at that. We are intent on meeting a lot of the super councils whenever they come into being, again, to engage with them, not only in terms of angling, but in terms of the actual tourist product. How do we manage it? How are we going to promote it, etc., etc. It doesn't make sense for us to go out on our own with nobody else. It doesn't make sense for their representatives to be out attending a trade fair where they might be able to show some leaflets on angling or canoeing or whatever. So again, this more joined up approach is certainly the way to go forward, I think.
No, it's just that in previous presentations from different bodies, it has been said here that the angling tours bring in actually more money than golf in the sport,
correct,
to this region, and I think it's not promoted enough, and it's very important that we protect it. I'll just go on to the foil in Carlingford, and I'm not claiming to know much about it, but I see here that it's going to get the powers are going to be transferred to the Locks Agency, and I was just wondering, pending the commencement of that, do you see any problems that will face?
In terms of, sorry, what the general powers of...
Sorry, the Locks Agency, it was under the Good Friday Agreement, it was set up, and it's the government legislation confers the following functions of the agency. That includes the management, the conservation, protection, improvement and development of the inland fisheries in the Foyle and Carlingford Loch areas, and the development and licensing of the aquaculture. Do you see any problems in the commencement of the commencement? I know that DARD are still
the lead agency.
And they're considering the applications for the licensing in those areas. But on after the commencement, or just before the commencement of the powers transfer, do you see any problems facing the like of the angling tours or fishermen?
We're actually working closely with the Locks Agency now, with Locks Agency and Fisheries Ireland, where we actually attend a number of trade shows together. In the past, we would have gone on our own, and in Fisheries Ireland would have gone their own, and Locks Agency gone their own. So now we have an agreed approach across where we provide a member of staff to these shows. So we're becoming closer. Even the harmonisation of things like fixed penalties, and that there is a sign that there's a need for us to make things simpler for the tourist angler and the domestic angler. It's complicated enough that we have 3 jurisdictional areas, but when you have different rules within those jurisdictional areas, it complicates it even further for people. And how do you translate it into a Lithuanian or a Romanian or whatever they happen to be? So there's a need for us to work better to harmonise, I think, all the legislation around fisheries in terms of promotion and development, and to make better use of the staff resources that we have and that are fairly limited.
Okay, thanks very much.
Dominic Bradley.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, first of all.
Morning.
You said that the changes that you're bringing in will lessen the penalties for low-impact offences and will enable you to direct your resources towards those offences which pose the greatest risk to inland fisheries. Would that be right? Yes. What are those offences, and what resources will you direct towards them?
I suppose the main offences will be really the inn has a significant impact on fish stocks. Illegal netting, for example. Someone who's not entitled to fish a net. A net has a much bigger impact than a rod, for example. So to equate the two of them in terms of prosecution case doesn't make sense. The fact that you haven't a licence for the rod is a much more smaller offence. If you're using a net, the potential to catch fish in much bigger quantities is there. and to catch fish maybe that are out of season that we're trying to protect. There's a spawning in that there. So those are the kind of differentials. It basically allows us, it would free up a bit more staff time. Whenever we take a prosecution, we obviously have to interview the defendant, we have to take statements, we have to write those statements up. There's a process to go through, we have to attend court. The court may be deferred for a day or two as well. So whenever you multiply it up, there's an awful lot of staff time there that doesn't come to the surface. And that can be better used by directing them and trying to protect wild fisheries to make sure that those fish stocks are sustainable for the future.
Okay.
Can I just come in a wee bit on that as well? It's just the actual offences that we're proposing to issue fixed penalties for, that's going to be discussed over the next couple of years. What we're proposing at the minute is just to have the powers to make regulations. So we've got some time yet to look at the sort of penalties that we're thinking of and which offences we're thinking of. But Seamus is quite correct. We spend over £30,000 per year on direct legal fees, never mind the actual cost of staff time as well and court costs. And the average fine that we get for an angling offence is around about £100, so that it doesn't really balance out for us.
Obviously, one of the biggest threats to fishing stocks is pollution. And we saw a number of instances there recently, one in my own constituency at the Bestbrook River, and there was another one at the Brantley Lake outside Dungannon. Does the legislation dealing with that type of offence lie with the Department of Agriculture? Is that what you're saying?
It basically lies with the DOE, the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. They have their responsibility. I can maybe just say that the Brantley fish kill wasn't due to pollution. It was actually a very natural event that occurs where you get a build-up of temperature, the water essentially stratifies, and what happens is the top layer, which has some oxygen in it, is extremely warm, and fish don't like the heat. But when they go down below the layer, they go into a layer that doesn't have oxygen, so they're like they're between the fire and the frying pan, there's nowhere to go, and the fish just naturally die then whenever they enter one of the areas.
Okay. Can you give me an example of some of the minor offences that for which penalties will be less under this legislation?
That we would be intending to give fixed penalty notices for.
Yeah.
Well, I think as we indicated earlier, some of those might be people who don't have a permit or a licence, and that's maybe not through a deliberate act, it's just through lack of knowledge or understanding. And as we said earlier, particularly people who maybe are here as tourists, those would certainly be some of the offences that we would be looking at giving fixed penalty notices for.
Right. Yeah. Is there a danger that if you relax the penalties that you might be seen to in some way encourage more of those offences?
I think, like a lot of these areas, it's always a balance, between getting a message out that it's still important to comply with the legislation, but also, as my colleagues were saying, the time and effort that goes into taking a prosecution through and how much that costs and the result at the end of it. That's trying to balance those factors while still getting a message out that it is an offence, and we will work to educate and inform people as much as we can before actually taking them through a criminal route.
Yeah. Mr. O'Hoshin there mentioned some of the barriers to the free passage of fish. One he referred to was the small hydroelectric schemes, which are becoming more plentiful, let's say. Are there any other barriers to free passage that need to be dealt with? Or is that the main one?
There are, to be quite honest with you. We are currently trying to gather information on barriers. We're working along with the Environment Agency on that issue, and we have come across quite a lot of barriers that are potential barriers to fish. We're talking about, for example, road bridges where the plinth, the area below the bridge, is of a certain height that during low water level, fish cannot ascend it. There is no fish pass. So this would mean works that were carried out by the DOE in the past, and probably very little reference to fish. There are other areas where someone has incorporated a river into their garden, for example, dammed off an area. So we're talking not just about hydro schemes, but really right across whatever you can think of. We probably come across And I say the issue for us is how we take this going forward. Obviously, we have legislation in place, but at some stage we want to have to start looking at some of these issues and prioritising which, if you like, are the more significant ones, which are the ones that are going to be critical and critical in terms of getting fish upstream, and that's what we're starting to do with our colleagues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Alderman Mullen.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Do I take it now that all private land that has fishing waters been through it, where before we couldn't, it was private, we didn't come under this, will they now be part of this legislation? Because some of this private land has got dams in them where fish go up, but they're on private estates, private land, and they're owned by private clubs and private organisations.
Well, I think the issue relates specifically to some of the proposals about removing weirs and getting access to the land to do that there, Oliver. We currently have access. We're actually authorised to go on anywhere there's a land to inspect the river, etc., etc. Apart from a garden, we regard it as a private curtilage, if you like. But it's really in relation to the ability to remove a weir, to give the department powers to access the land to remove that weir. Whereas before we might have to ask permission from the landowners to get access to it.
But now we can do that.
Well, with the changes in the legislation, we can't do it. Nothing to stop us inspecting a weir or inspecting a piece of river, nothing at all. This is particularly around the issue of removing weirs and access to those lands to give us permission to do that there. It's a very specific piece.
And with these private organisations that owns strips of river or whatever for the rich fishing areas, will they now be held responsible for the abstraction of gravel beds, etc., spawning beds, etc., and all of that?
Well, they are currently. Anybody who hasn't got a licence, what we're talking about within this piece of legislation is to extend it. Currently, under the Fisheries Act, you need permission from us to remove gravel or riverbed material. We're going to apply this across to lakes as well. Previously, lakes weren't part of the legislation, so this gives us better coverage than it did previously.
The other thing is, raise up ASSIs, scientific areas now. It's been introduced to a lot of the ground and rural areas.
Yep.
It's come down to rivers.
Yes.
How do we get over that there if we want to put in, say, a fishing stand for disabled or for a club to extend access through that there for fishing?
Well, generally, we'll generally talk to the Northern Ireland Environment Agency about the designation, and we will do as we normally do with our own works. Anywhere where there's an ASSI or an SAC, we'll outline our proposals, have discussion with them, and hopefully get agreement as to what we can and can't do, because clearly the ASSI is there to protect a particular species, not there. So we have to be mindful that we cannot always get what we want if it's going to damage the reason for that area being protected.
And the last question, Chair, these new super councils, do they have the authority, the planning, will they have the planning authority now of anything what they call aquaculture in the marine? Who has the planning authority? I know Britain, place in Wales, Scotland, authority.
Not sure.
I'm not sure. Can we maybe come back to you on that one? I'm not sure exactly what powers are transferring over to the councils in those specific areas.
I think it's important we find out there,
Yes,
because we're doing new legislation that would need to be specified within the legislation.
If we can come back to the committee, Clark.
If you could, because part of that, my question would centre around the role of the Crown Estate and as the landowner of the seabed, and how that would pan out, and also not mention which council, but if councils say who have harbours or facilities they got near rivers, mouths of rivers, sometimes when they do work, it can change the flow, the tidal flow, because that's all done and tested beforehand, which would sometimes cause build-up of sand, blockage at the mouth of the rivers. I don't know if there's legislation in there for councils to work with yourselves on that, because for my belief as councils, if want to do something like that, then go ahead and do it.
No, that it's actually regulated. The Northern Ireland Environment Agency have that remit. So anywhere which is removing material and disposing of it needs authorisation, and they'll currently come back to us. If you look at the Glendon River, for example, they normally dig out that channel there to allow boats to come in and out. They needed any approval, and they also need it ourselves to approve in terms of the timing of it. So there is a liaison that goes on there currently. You can't just go on and basically dig out and remove material, because you need a licence to do so. So it's
I'm not even
it's
talking about digging
regulated.
out the river. I'm talking about building a structure.
Yes, in terms of
the
harbour.
river.
Yep.
I'm thinking of another area, not the Glendon
Right.
River. It's down in black and white
Right.
as to the effects of it in the long term, and I'm just wondering how much consultation he's had on it.
Right.
Okay, well,
That's something we could maybe clarify that.
and come back through.
Thank you,
Committee
Chair.
clerk.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed for the presentation and for the responses to the questions. We'll, in due course, receive an analysis of the responses from the consultation, and then after that we'll give a few.
Thanks very much.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Tell me this. Did you get any information out of the monitoring round stuff?
Okay. As I said there, we'll get the responses to the consultation in due course, and we'll come back to that point. Okay. Next item then on is there any other points? No. Okay. Next item then is the briefing from Sport NI regarding participation of women in sport. If you go back to the memo at page 209 in your pack, and also then the research paper at 214. The officials who are coming in, Antoinette McKeown, Angela Platt and Dr Paul Donnelly. The briefing papers from Sport NI weren't received in time to be included in the meeting packs, but they're in the table packs.
Get them off. Yeah, these. Right.
If you speed read it, you'll get through it, no problem. Okay. Okay, thanks for coming this morning, Paul, Antoinette and Angela. And if you'd like to make an opening statement about the subject.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair. Just before I start, can I just say welcome back, Chair, to the world of culture, arts and leisure. I'm very conscious that you were once Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure, and you will know and be very familiar with the territory we're talking about today. And no doubt you'll have more insights on your sporting memories than I have. So it's good to...
Sporting memories, personal.
I was just saying they're not personal, obviously.
Well, both personal and as Minister, no
Yes.
doubt. We will lean on your knowledge. We will lean on your knowledge this morning. Just also wanted to say it's been February since we've been last here in front of the committee, and we've had some fantastic wins in sports since February. We've had a really, really busy summer. We've returned from Glasgow with the best medal haul since 1986, and doing further work on that and now to increase that for the Gold Coast. We've had our first female boxer participate ever in the Commonwealth Games and came home with silver, the first female boxer to ever fight, and came home with silver, narrowly missing on the gold. We've had really, really good success recently in our Sainsbury School Games, and it's really important that the School Games are seen as a pathway to performance for many young people who continue to stay and perform in sport as a result of their participation in the School Games. For those of you who know me, the fact that Glenavon won the Irish Cup this year for the first time in 19 years, and I'm a Glenavon fan, was really good. And Carl Frampton's recent win and World Championship are all helping to instil a very strong pride in Northern Ireland community through our athletes, and the fact that we've had a whole array of multi-sport summer schemes at grassroots communities, building community relations and really good sporting experiences for our children has been really, really good to witness throughout the summer. But that's not what we're here to talk about, though what we are here to talk about has a very direct relevance on how we're performing as a society, community and region in sport. You've asked us here today to talk about what we're doing in relation to women's and girls' involvement in sport, and also, really timely, the background and findings from the internationally recognised research project entitled Sports Policy Factors Leading to International Sporting Success, or SPLIS, as we know it. Rather than just listening to Sport NI in respect of what we're doing in relation to women in sport, I'm very honoured and privileged to have Angela Platt, Business Manager with Ulster Hockey, Chair of the Female Sports Forum in Northern Ireland, but also an internationally recognised and renowned athlete in hockey and association football, who's here to give the personal experience as a recipient and participant in our women's initiatives here. With me is Paul Donnelly, who is a manager with Sport NI and has been pivotal in leading our SPLIS research project. But outside of work, Paul, as an active player and coach in his own local community and club, and has played hurling for County Antrim, so brings that experience with him too. I'm just going to say very briefly about an opening statement, I suppose, in relation to what Sport NI is doing on women and women in sport. We take very seriously the fact that we know that there are challenges in respect of women's participation in sport, and that additional effort is sometimes required to ensure that women discover, develop and sustain their own sporting experience, not just in terms of the frequency of participation, but that we also support pathways to performance. For some groups in society, including women, additional efforts aren't always made to facilitate that access, and we recognise that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We also know that in almost every sporting activity, whether that is grassroots or high performance, whether it's coaching or leadership, whether it's in management, women participate less and are less visible in the sport. 46% of women have participated in sport in the previous 12 months, as opposed to 61% for men. And around 78% of coaches in Northern Ireland are male, though you're going to hear how we're changing some of that at the minute. So women are not just missing out in terms of the benefits of an active, healthy lifestyle. We think that sport could be missing out by us not identifying hidden talent that's out there, and also some of the fresh insights that women bring as leaders and managers, as Angela does. We want to make sure we get the best out of it. We know in Sport NI that when we target women in sport, we improve their frequency of participation, and we create pathways to performance. Our Active Communities programme, for example, has a female participation rate of 55%. That's because we specifically targeted women participants. But one solution doesn't fit all. And you will know this from the briefing that was done for this committee in respect of women in sport, and we don't want to rehearse all of the detail of that. We're assuming you're very familiar with it, and indeed we work very closely with the Assembly team on it. But I just want to set out very quickly our current policy interventions and ask Angela to go into that, and also our current policy interventions, which Angela is going to speak a wee bit about, but also our future priorities in terms of how we increase female participation. Some of you will know that we adopted a policy in 2008 specifically designed to target the underrepresentation of women in sport, and it has a very clear aspiration to ensure girls' access and participation in the provision of facilities, goods, services and employment opportunities in sport and physical recreation. And some of the detailed briefing that we give you demonstrates current interventions in relation to that. But for the purposes of today's brief, we thought we want to bring to life and give you some examples of the impact of what those interventions are doing on the ground. There's no better person to do that than Angela. So
Thank you, Antoinette. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you all today about some of the interventions that are happening practically for females in sport. And as a very proud sports person myself, in terms of the experiences I've had from sport, I think it's imperative to say that I'm enjoying a role that's actually giving those opportunities back to other females to enjoy that opportunity to work through sport. A number of those interventions, I'll begin with the Female Sports Forum, which is a group close to my own heart in terms of how that was established and obviously the work that the group is trying to do moving forward. Sporting Eye has played an integral part in supporting the development of that group since 2012. It began its life through an engagement with a number of females who are currently working in sporting governing bodies, and it was over a social gathering where a number of us came together and said, is there anything we can do to make a difference for other females in our own sports? Organisations that are currently involved in that are the Irish Football Association, Ulster Rugby, Ulster Ladies Gaelic Athletic Association, Ulster Camogie, and my own organisation, Ulster Hockey. We want to evolve that to encourage other organisations to get involved. But we had a common goal in terms of providing opportunities for women and girls to get involved and, more importantly, stay involved in sport and physical activity, not just as participants, but as also as administrators, coaches and leaders. And I think that's the imperative aspect of what we're trying to work towards. We also wanted to ensure that we could, as an organisation, lead the charge for increased media profile for females involved in sport, whether that be at the grassroots level or at international level in particular as well. But the challenge facing us was what could we really do about that. So we engaged a stakeholder conference where we asked the audience out there, in terms of those involved in female sport, what do we need to do? And that really gave consideration for media and promotion, role models, and understanding what females needed in terms of that support mechanism. And that revealed some common areas that we're trying to develop a business case around, in terms of workforce development being the coaching pathways, increased opportunities for player pathways in particular as to how those players move through a system, the development of a coordinated and joined up approach. And I think that's the key element here, is that it needs to be joined up. There's a lot of interventions that are in isolation. I'm trying to get a strategic focus for that moving forward. And then the final point was really appropriate recognition and reward in terms of how we recognise females involved in sport. So the members of the forum have agreed to work together, working on an action plan with research and policy framework. And we're at this minute in time working on a business case and a strategic direction, but we do need assistance in that. We are 5 organisations and 5 individuals at the minute working on our own with that, and that's really where Sporting Eye has given us support to do that. But our planned future work recognises that we have to evolve that to include other sectors, be that education, be that local authorities. Our work now is actually establishing that, and we've got a meeting established for next week where we've invited additional key partners to that meeting to look at the strategic way forward so that it is more joined up. So from our perspective, the real focus with the Female Sports Forum is to provide a clear strategic focus, and really that needs to come from a governmental perspective as well, in terms of what government departments can work together too. And I'm enjoying the role as acting chair in that organisation, and trying to engage with broadcasters and media providers too, to evolve that group even further. But it's still a work in progress, and certainly with the support of Sport Northern Ireland, we're continuing that work as well. The second intervention that I really have gained a significant amount of support through has been the Women into Leadership programme. Over the last 18 months, I've been involved in a leadership development programme through Sport Northern Ireland's investment that has really helped to target individuals working in sports bodies. The programme is based on required leadership competencies and has included a series of workshops delivered by leaders in sport, and the provision of executive coaching to individuals. 17 women working within the sports system have benefited from those opportunities, and I'm currently one of those individuals. It's not remiss for me to say that I came into my job in 2009 and evolved into a leader. There wasn't really that support mechanism in place back in 2009, but certainly over the last 2 years there's been a system in place to support leaders, and particularly female leaders within the programme. Interventions from Sport and I have certainly changed the landscape in terms of how we approach leadership in sport in particular, and the programme has provided opportunities for me and others to learn about what it takes to be a leader so that we can lead our organisation forward. It's provided me with a self-assessment environment and the others involved in the programme to look at what am I good at, but also what do I need to work on and to improve as a leader to make myself move forward and my organisation move forward. A personal development plan for growth, so it really is an individualised process in terms of what females need in particular in that aspect, but also understanding what it is what it needs in terms of the role of being a leader. And then obviously the one-to-one executive coaching in terms of support mechanism that ensures that I've got a safe learning environment that I can then impart that knowledge and experience on to others. So the journey through that programme has been exceptional for those that have been involved in the programme. I've grown more comfortable in terms of my leadership. There are still times where I feel slightly out of my depth. But that's natural in a leadership role. But I look forward to continuing my role as a leader within that programme so that I can impart that knowledge and experience to the next cohort of females coming through the system. And really, I appreciate the opportunity to experience that learning environment. And my organisation is now benefiting from that in terms of where Ulster Hockey is now going, in terms of the work that we are doing. And that really has been a joined up approach through Sport Northern Ireland and the executive coaching programme that we've been involved in. Performance Focus is another intervention that is a partnership with Sport Northern Ireland and governing bodies of sport, and it aims to see more Northern Ireland athletes winning on the world stage at Olympic, Paralympic, World and Commonwealth levels. And as Antoinette has alluded to earlier, we seek pride in our Northern Ireland athletes when they are successful on a world stage. And having been an international athlete representing my country, I feel it's very important that we do attach some significance to that. The Performance Focus programme is investing $13 million over a 4-year period between 2013 and 2017 to create conditions affording athletes a greater chance of future success. And My Sport Hockey is benefiting from that programme in relation to investment in professional posts, but also in investment in the system that athletes then progress through. Currently, in terms of that programme, there's 74 posts are being supported, and 16 of those, that's 23%, are currently held by females. And obviously it would be an intention to support those females through the system. The programme itself really has enabled Ulster Hockey to develop systems and other governing bodies that are involved in the programme, which has led our athletes, and in particular our female athletes, to enhance their experience of the international stage. It's helped establish a high-performance culture within Hockey for Elite Players, a talent development system whereby our players can progress through that programme, and also, more importantly, linking to our grassroots programme. There's still work to be done in terms of linking those programmes more specifically, but it is certainly more of a joined-up programme than previous funding programmes that have been invested through Sport Northern Ireland, and that's my practical experience in terms of where we are at the minute through Performance Focus. Active Communities, which Antoinette has also alluded to in terms of the initiative, aims to increase participation in sport and physical recreation in Northern Ireland. And working in partnership with 26 district councils has helped over 100,000, or aims to help over 100,000 people in Northern Ireland get active and stay active. And I think that's the crucial part for me, is the retention of that activity, not just one-off activity. Governing bodies of sport, such as my own organisation, are also partners in the delivery mechanism for that programme. It employs 117 coaches, 43 of which are females. That's 37%. And to date, for the year from the 1st of April, the programme has supported participants' involvement of 60,243 participants. And a number of those that are female is 55%, which is 33,371. Our programme, in terms of our specific hockey programme, has really benefited significantly from that in specific areas. One example of ours is the Antrim Newton Abbey area, where we've more specifically focused on providing opportunities to get involved, but actually exit routes and links to our clubs and our schools to ensure that there is that long-term aspect to development. And I think that's the beauty about the Active Communities programme for my sport, is that we've ensured that that link has been there. And I'm not sure every sport has adopted that, and I think that's where the programme could benefit. But it's really about the retention and keeping people involved and giving them other opportunities once they've had the taste for the sport in terms of getting active. And then finally, the Active Awards for Sport is a small grants programme primarily aimed at grassroots sport and community-based organisations. That really aims to prioritise sports clubs, community groups and governing bodies, especially those based on greatest need. I think we're all guilty at times of working with those who are already involved in our sport and not taking our sport or activity to those who maybe can't afford to come to our activities. And the beauty about the Active Awards for Sport programme is it gives us an opportunity to take it to new communities and new areas that haven't had a chance to play our sport. Ulster Hockey was very successful in securing a grant to specifically target women and girls in our programme to encourage them to become involved and to stay involved. And our focus in that programme is sustainability. So what we're doing is capacity building young girls and females within specific social need areas to then continue with the programme once the funding cycle has finished. And I think that's a crucial aspect of what we're trying to do with encouraging long-term involvement with females, is empowering them and giving them the capacity and the skills to then deliver in their own community with the support of a governing body such as hockey. And I think that's where I see the more benefit and more value in terms of the interventions that have come about through funding. And the second aspect of that programme, we also are endeavouring to implement a mentoring programme for female coaches so that they can have the leadership aspect in terms of our sport. But hopefully that's given you a practical element in terms of some of the interventions that I've been involved in and my organisation's been involved in through Sport Northern Ireland's interventions. It's really designed to give women an opportunity and girls an opportunity to get involved and stay involved, and hopefully we continue to work in partnership to move that forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just very briefly, priorities for action going forward. We're reviewing our 2008 policy, we know, as part of taking forward a new corporate plan. We have met some of and exceeded some of the targets set in it. We want to be ambitious yet again for even more. We want to help support Angela and others in developing the female forum even further, including some of the key issues around media and promotion, role models, understanding the nature and participation and progression to achieve potential for women, and to ensure that all aspects of our corporate plan we include underrepresentation of women and means of addressing that. I want to just very briefly ask Paul now to take us through the splits element of the presentation.
Thank you, Antoinette, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to come to the committee to discuss the internationally recognised research project. Over the next few minutes, I will provide members with some background information on the Splits Research Project, some of its key findings, and our plans for using this data to inform the future direction of sport here in Northern Ireland. But before doing that, I'd like to put on record my thanks to David Hilditch for attending an internationally recognised conference in Antwerp last year, and also for supporting the work of Sport Northern Ireland whilst there, and also for bringing the research project to the attention of this committee here today.
He hasn't come back from it, did you?
But again, at the conference, David was very vocal and very supportive of the work that Sport and I has been involved with, along with our partners, and I do appreciate that. Over the last few years, national sports organisations and governments throughout the world have committed increasing amounts of money to elite sport in an attempt to win major medals in international competitions. And as nations have engaged in a power struggle to achieve international success, their elite sports systems appear to become increasingly similar, and more than ever are based around a single elite sports development model. Today, it's no longer the case of what you do, it's how well you do it. The strategic investment in elite sports systems to deliver international sporting success has been referred to as a global sporting arms race. This said, the study of elite sports systems is relatively new, and only in 2002 did research begin which was aimed at increasing the knowledge base around the optimum strategy for delivering on international sporting success. The study collected information from 6 nations to establish whether or not data could be comparable across a number of nations. And in 2010, a second split study was launched involving 16 different countries, including Northern Ireland. The original split research model identified 9 key sports policy factors, or pillars as they're now described, and these are presented in Figure 2 of the briefing paper that was presented to the committee for today. In order to make an assessment of elite sports system here in Northern Ireland, relevant data are presented in a publication, a screen publication, over 120 pages long, which relates to the 9 pillars themselves. And in assessing the Northern Ireland's competitive position, more than 100 critical success factors are considered across 9 pillars of the integrated model. I do think, members, at this point it would be important to try and summarise the ingredients of the SPLIS model just to help you with understanding. Pillar 1 relates to financial support and is concerned with measuring the investment in sport generally and elite sport specifically. This pillar provides a basis for the extent to which the remaining 8 process-oriented pillars can be implemented. Pillar 2 relates to an integrated model for policy development, and this is concerned with assessing the organisation and the structure of sport and the extent to which there is an integrated approach to policy development. At a strategic level, it is thought that for nations to have a realistic chance of sporting success, an appropriate lead needs to be given by government. Pillar 3 relates to participation in sport, and this is concerned with assessing sport participation at 3 levels: sport during and after school, formal and informal sporting opportunities. Evidence suggests that future elite athletes often participate in several sports simultaneously during their formative years before they eventually specialise in the sport in which they strive to excel. Pillar 4 relates to talent identification and development, and again this is concerned with assessing the quality of talent ID and development processes within sports and the existence of a nationally coordinated programme. Pillar 5 relates to athletic and post-career support, and this is focused on assessing, again, athletic career and post-career support that is provided in a particular country. In many nations, athletes pursuing their sport are recognised and treated as employees who receive funding for living and sporting costs, and at the end of their athletic career, some nations have programmes in place to support athletes and transition out of the sport that they're involved with into things such as coaching, managing, etc. Pillar 6 relates to training facilities, and this is concerned with assessing the state and range of sports facilities that are in place to support player-athlete development. And again, evidence suggests that well-developed, specific facilities with priority access for elite athletes are key characteristics of an effective sports development system. Again, on the last 3, Pillar 7 relates to coaching, a very important ingredient within sport. Without people, it can't be delivered. And this is focused on assessing coaching provision and coach development. Evidence suggests that the quality and quantity of coaches is important at all levels and are important factors in both participation and performance pathways. Pillar 8 relates to international/national competition, and this is concerned with the organisation of competitions at national international level, as both have been identified as important factors for athlete development and success. And last but not least relates to scientific research, and this is concerned with scientific input to elite sport and seeks to examine the extent to which there is a coordinated approach to the organisation and dissemination of research findings. So each pillar within the SPLIS model is considered in relation to various critical success factors using inventories or questionnaires, and these have been developed from the original SPLIS study carried out in 2002. These inventories have been successful in enabling meaningful comparisons to be made across elite sports systems in different nations. And as you can see within the report, which is well over 100 pages, it includes a number of key findings relating to the Northern Ireland Sports Development System under 3 categories. 1 would be strengths of the current system, 2 would be the challenges facing the system, and 3 would be suggestions for improvement. For example, the following findings were reported against Pillars 1 and Pillars 2. Strengths-wise, there is central government commitment to sport generally and elite sport specifically here in Northern Ireland. 2, there's a government department and an arm's-length body with a remit for sport, which isn't common in other countries. There has been unprecedented levels of funding in sport over the last 10 years, a 300% increase over the period 2001-2010. And within sport in Northern Ireland, there is a passion and belief in the content of Sport Matters and its aspirations for sport over the next 10 years. As regards challenges, many recognised governing bodies in Northern Ireland are actually branches of All Ireland or UK national governing bodies, and therefore may present challenges for planning, coordination and delivery, but challenges we think we can overcome. There's a breadth of investment in Olympic, Paralympic sport, Commonwealth sport, culturally significant sports, which means the policy has a broad rather than narrow focus. And then again, that has implications for investment and how we invest. Processes are perceived to be an over-bureaucratic and time-consuming, and we have plans in place to look to address that in the short, medium and longer term. In terms of suggestions for improvement, this isn't going to be any great surprise. Greater certainty in the planning process, primarily relating to finance. So the core ingredient in terms of making the SPLIS model, integrated model work, is investment over a long period of time. In terms of concluding remarks, relative to other countries, Northern Ireland elite sport development system is still in its infancy. And as a result, now is an opportune time to take stock of where the region is and how it compares with others. The research report tackles the first of these issues, documenting where Northern Ireland is now. It brings together in one place the key data from 9 pillars and presents it on behalf of the sporting community here in Northern Ireland. It is significant to note that the data was not available from a single source, It came from inside the heads of consultees, experts in the area of high-performance sport, experts in the area of community sport. It came from policy documents that reviewed, data sources that were interrogated, surveys of athletes, coaches and performance directors. And all of that combined provide us with a picture of where we are in relation to the Northern Ireland system. In the second phase of the research, and I believe to be probably one of the most important, the findings of Northern Ireland will be benchmarked against the other nations who are involved in the research, such as Belgium, Finland, France, Australia, to assess how the region compares with practice elsewhere in the world. By taking part in this type of process, stakeholders in the sports development system in Northern Ireland can, where necessary, develop a system to ensure it is at the cutting edge of best practice internationally. It is anticipated that the international benchmarking report will be available in January of the new year. That concludes my brief on SPLIS. I'd like to pass back to Antoinette.
And very briefly, we're bringing forward a new corporate plan, which you will be able to see the influence of SPLIS on the organisation's planning going forward. But we are an organisation that has a role from the playground to the podium, and our corporate plan will reflect that. We want to see internationally recognised excellence at every single level of sport in Northern Ireland. You know, we know we're taking forward a corporate plan in a very, very challenging financial environment. There's huge expectation out there. All of you know it from your own constituents and your own communities. Huge expectations on the funding that we can bring to local, to sport and local communities, and there's a much reduced budget. We're working with communities, with sports bodies, with the executive, with DCAL, and we hope with yourselves to actually get the right balance so that the money that we are putting in as part of our new corporate plan going forward actually gets the biggest impact and hits sport where it's most needed, so that we're making the impact and outcomes for sport we know you want us to do and making the best use of public money. Thanks for your interest.
Okay, thanks indeed for the presentations there. Could I just start off with two questions, and then there are a number of committee members who want to ask other questions. In terms of SPLIS, how well does it dovetail with other programmes in Northern Ireland, such as Performance Focus?
There are 9 pillars, as described within SPLIS. Performance Focus as a programme covers 5 of those pillars. So there's a direct linkage to existing investments that are being made through Performance Focus. And Sinai, there happens at Sinai, our investment through athlete investment programme. So completely aligned.
Good. And Angela, what role does Sport NI have in events such as the Park Run and Run Her, events that have a large number of female participants?
Excuse me, Chair. The role really is empowering those governing bodies who are responsible for running those activities and events in terms of the support mechanism. And there is investment through some of the programmes that I've talked about, but the support really comes from that empowering us as a governing body to be more effective in terms of our operations, in terms of our governance structures, in terms of our staff that are working on the ground, that we can run those events effectively, and also in terms of that promotion, to help that support mechanism so that we can then encourage more females to get involved and more importantly, stay involved in the sport.
Thank you. Dominic?
Thank you. I noticed that, over the last number of years there's been a big increase in the number of women, girls playing various codes of football, rugby, Gaelic and association football as well. And I think that probably has boosted the number of women participating in sport hugely. I know that, my own constituency past the football grounds, and I see, huge numbers of girls and women practicing and training there. And I'd be remiss of me not to congratulate the Armagh ladies team and their captain, Caroline O'Hanlon, who was very successful this year, participated in the Commonwealth Games in netball as well as that. And of course, Mrs McKevitt here would be complaining to me if I didn't mention some of the successes of the Down ladies at Mogi, and wish them luck at football on Sunday and so on. But doubtless she'll have something to say about that. But I do notice, especially, I probably see more of the Gaelic, the ladies Gaelic than the other codes. But I do notice that quite frequently, almost exclusively, that the managers of the teams are men. And it just seems, sort of, at a provincial final or a national semi-final, to see two male managers there seems out of place. And, I was wondering what is happening to bring along the ladies themselves and their managerial skills in rugby, soccer, Gaelic and so on. Those three especially, since they're more visible. I suppose you could say that the hockey and the camogie are more traditionally associated with women, whereas the other three aren't. Generally speaking, the camogie and the hockey are managed by the ladies themselves, I think, but football hasn't progressed to that level yet.
I'm going to ask Angela to start it, and we'll come in.
Very good question in relation to the work that we're actually doing within the Female Sports Forum, and that's actually one of the sections that have been identified through the three governing bodies that you've mentioned in terms of football, rugby and ladies football. I think in relation to the targets that we're trying to look at, there was a gap, and we all did an assessment in terms of our own sport. And you're right in terms of camogie and hockey that predominantly we have more females than males in terms of those roles and responsibility, be it managers or coaches. So the Female Sports Forum, as part of their business plan, wants to put a targeted programme in place to develop the next generation of leaders through coaching and management in relation to those three sports that you've mentioned. But obviously from that perspective we need to actually look at how we can invest in that and what other partners we need to have in place to support that. That's a long-term plan. I think it's not going to happen overnight in relation to next year we will have X number of female coaches, because there is a coaching pathway that we need to work through. But all three of the organisations that you've talked about are committed to working with the Female Sports Forum to engage and encourage more females. And I think the challenge for that environment is for females to feel comfortable that it is their sport, because they are traditionally seen as being male sports. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why the Female Sports Forum actually evolved, because there was a recognition that the perception of that sport is that it's played by men or boys, and we wanted to try and change that perception and make it more comfortable for females, because there are a number of knowledgeable females out there about sport who enjoy imparting their knowledge back on others and have very good soft skills in terms of how you coach young people and how you encourage young people, and we need to harness that information and give those females that opportunity. So there is a direct, I suppose, target that we want to actually work through. It's what partners we can engage through the Female Sports Forum to target those three sports and other sports in particular to try and get more people in terms of women to progress up that pathway. But certainly Sport Northern Ireland has been a supporter of that target. It's just how we then put the steps in place to move that forward. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm pleased to hear that you are putting structures in place to ensure that in the future more women come to the fore in management and in some cases in refereeing as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And the Irish rugby team, ladies rugby team, has been very successful as well this year. And looking at soccer, rugby, and Gaelic, as I say, and the increase in the numbers there, has any analysis been done of why there has been quite a bit of success over those three codes? And can we learn anything from that we can apply to other games which don't have as high a profile?
In terms of Gaelic rugby and soccer, Dominic, the success of their women's teams as opposed to the success of female...
More success in getting girls and women involved in playing those games and involved in sport.
Yeah.
I mean, are there any lessons that we can learn from that success which we can use maybe to help other, as I say, less visible games increase participation there?
Yeah, and in terms of, I'll ask Paul to come in terms of studies and research being done, but if you look at the fact that rugby, soccer and Gaelic are the top three participation games in Northern Ireland, it is not a surprise that you will actually see proportionately of the female population more females coming in to play those games. That's not to say that they're not visible in other areas. Lisa Kearney, for example, world champion in relation to judo. We can give many more examples in other sports, but it's because of the profile that those three sports have. But I think, interestingly, the profile of the female game in those sports, as Angela said, is not where it should be. And Sport NI is continuing to challenge and encourage those three main sports, for example, so that when you have gifted players like Caroline O'Hanlon, who plays netball, who plays Gaelic, plays it at a very, very high level, when Caroline stops her career, is the GAA going to keep her on as a coach, as a mentor? Are they going to give her a career as a manager? And that's what we need to start, because if we see those big games bringing those role models through, then we're actually starting to break the cycle or the ceiling that's there at the minute. We also had Claire Timoney plays international Northern Ireland women's team, and Michael O'Neill joined Sport NI at the All-Ireland final on Sunday on a message of Sport United, getting other sports to come together and support, but also in recognition of the fact that Claire Timoney is an international sports person in Northern Ireland. She does not get that profile. So I think the governing bodies also have got to step up to the plate in respect of that as well, and we're continuing to challenge that and encourage it.
Yeah, from a research perspective, there have been significant pieces of research undertaken in terms of understanding sport, the sports sector here in Northern Ireland, from a levels of participation perspective, from a volunteering perspective, from a club membership perspective. And all the research is reinforcing the fact that women are underrepresented in sport. So the paper that was produced by the research team reinforces that. A more recent paper produced by the Assembly team also concluded that there needs to be more local research undertaken to actually understand why specific target groups are involved in sport as against that of others. And that's certainly a piece of work.
I do recognise what Antoinette said there, that soccer, Gaelic and rugby are the largest participatory sports here. That's fair enough. But a number of years ago, there were no women involved in rugby, there were no women involved in soccer, there were no women involved in Gaelic. Now there are huge numbers. Now, what has led to that level of participation, and can we learn from that and increase participation across other sports which are maybe not as I said, not as popular even as those three?
I agree. I think that there are lessons to be learned from those three sports. But just to add what Antoinette has said, I mean, the three organisations that we're talking about are professional bodies with full-time professional staff dedicated to working on thematic areas, including disability sport, women's involvement in sport, etc., etc. Other sports, medium to smaller size sports, may not have that capacity to do that similar type of work. So there's another layer of thinking to happen in relation to that. But I do take your point. There's probably a specific piece of work that could be undertaken to understand why those three sports have been successful in getting female representation in their sport.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. Antoinette, you started off by talking about the Commonwealth Games, and you also, as part of your presentation, talked about sport, international sporting excellence, and I agree with that entirely. We did have a very good Commonwealth Games, the best since '86, as you've said, but it was largely due to old sport. We have to remember that, and that's not to take away from those who... But I was very interested in Paul's presentation. Can I ask a question of sport? Anza, you're probably the best person to answer it. Who is the hockey player on page 67?
Ian Lures from Northern Ireland.
As I thought, and I'll come back.
Don't do us as I thought. If we had seen that signed piece of paper in your hand.
I'll prove that I knew. I'll prove that I knew who it was when I come back here.
Okay.
Despite Mr. McCrae not believing me. Well, you talked about sports development system, and about funding had increased from 2001 to 2010 by 300%. And I welcome all of that. That's good. You also talked about challenges of sporting bodies and so on. And that's why I'm talking about Ian Lourdes, because I think you know what I'm going to say here.
I do.
Because he is an internationally renowned sports person who went to Wellington College, I think in Belfast, who couldn't compete in the Commonwealth Games because we didn't send a team. So he competed for England. Now, this is not a criticism of your organisation, but sporting bodies need to step up to the plate and make sure they are alongside the Sport NI and what Sport NI wants to do. Because if the taxpayer and the ratepayer, through decisions that councils or this assembly makes, are funding sport to the level at which it's now funding, and it could always be more, I accept that, and you could always do more with a greater budget. But if we've increased our spending by 300%, then our athletes need to be able to participate at the highest level. And there is a clear issue here, and it may well manifest itself on the floor of the House next Tuesday, where for many athletes across the Commonwealth Games is the pinnacle of their sporting career.
Yeah.
But with all due respect to Angela wasn't afforded that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so there is something that needs to be done by Ulster Hockey, the Irish Hockey Union, whatever it is, to allow Angela and those, or maybe not you, Angela and
I would make a comeback if it was, yes, definitely.
but to Angela, the people who Angela is working with, to compete in the Commonwealth Games in a Northern Ireland hockey team. To allow Ulster rugby players, young rugby players, to compete in the sevens at the Commonwealth Games. And so Ian Lures, and that's why I'm interested that there's Sport NI, and I'm glad you've used that, because there's a man who competes for Great Britain at hockey, who's from this city, who, sporting, a lot of sporting time and money has gone into to develop his career, and he's lost to sport in Northern Ireland. Because yes, he'll compete for GB internationally, but when it comes to Commonwealth Games, because we don't send a team, he has to play for England. And I think there's one other player as well.
There is Martin Leghorn, yes.
So there are two people who would be, again, it would be their choice. And I would imagine they would play for Northern Ireland in the Commonwealth Games and play for GB in international hockey. But we really do need to get this sorted out, because you can swim for Ireland in the Olympics, and you can swim for Northern Ireland in the Commonwealth Games. You can box for Ireland in the Olympics, and you can box for Northern Ireland in the Commonwealth Games. You can play hockey for Ireland, but you can't compete for the Northern Ireland Commonwealth Games team because they don't send one. You can play rugby for Ireland, and the same applies. We don't send a team to the rugby sevens. And really, the challenge that Paul, this is not to do with politics. This is to do with people being allowed to achieve their sporting goals. And they're being denied that opportunity. This young lady wasn't able to go to the Commonwealth Games because of politics. And that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed soon, so that the money that's being invested will allow a level playing field to be created, and the maximum amount of benefit can then be afforded to athletes who are being denied the opportunity to take part in the Commonwealth Games. For many of them, that would be the pinnacle of their sporting career. Do you agree?
Well, I actually watched Mark and Ian play for England in the Commonwealth Games. They were superb, I have to say, and made a huge difference to that team. We are probably unique within the United Kingdom in terms of the structures that we work to, because Sport Northern Ireland supports, funds, works with Island of Ireland governing bodies. We work with Northern Ireland governing bodies. We work with GB governing bodies, and we work with UK governing bodies. It is not up to Sport NI to say we won't have an Island of Ireland governing body, or we won't recognise a UK governing body, and that is not our role. But clearly, we agree with you that where there has been a very successful precedent set in some sports in respect of the Commonwealth Games participation, and look, you're absolutely right, our boxers returned with 9 out of our 12 medals. If that precedent has already been set, how can we explore how we can actually achieve that for other games without upsetting, or with us actually putting down an interference with the structures that may be Island of Ireland? And I think that's something that's worthy of further exploration. And indeed, Angela and I have already had discussions on it.
Yeah. And Paul, in terms of the challenges you talked about, this is politics with a small p preventing sports persons taking part in the Commonwealth Games. And those are the type of challenges you're having to grapple with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as the person who's directly dealing with it, what's your view, if I may ask you?
My view is similar to that of Antoinette's, William. Ultimately, there are discussions need to be had with governing bodies. We've had them intermittently over the last number of years, and issues have in the end been sorted out. But I'm not, shying away from the statement that you just made. It's certainly something we need to grapple with the governing bodies, and that's Sport and I leading that charge.
And so, can I ask you, as someone who was an international hockey player, and from a personal perspective, you're one of the people who've been affected directly by this. What's your view?
I'll give you my personal and my work response to that as well, because obviously I'm working within hockey. Personal view, as an international player, I would have loved nothing more than have had the opportunity to play in a Northern Ireland Commonwealth Games team. For those of you who don't know, hockey is actually a very high standard in the Commonwealth Game, with 6 of the top 12 teams in the world actually competing in that competition. So it's the next best thing to a World Cup or an Olympic Games. It's not a lower level. So from my perspective, personally, I would love that opportunity as a player. I would love that opportunity for players who are currently playing in our system to have that. From the organisation perspective, there's no prouder person than me to see Ian and Mark playing in those competitions. I played with them at the same time in terms of when they were involved in the system. We are undertaking discussions within our organisation with Ulster Hockey, with Sport Northern Ireland involved in that, with Irish Hockey involved in that process, to ascertain what is the way forward for us as an all-island body. Because my view in terms of Ulster Hockey is that my role is to make sure that everyone is given the opportunity to play at the very highest level, no matter what choice that is. And I think that's very clear in terms of where we are. So it's a challenging time for the sport, but I completely agree with you. It's something that we have earmarked the Gold Coast for in terms of 4 years' time. That we would like nothing more than having a hockey team in the Commonwealth Games. We just have those challenges with the national governing body in terms of making sure that that happens.
I mean, Chair, whenever we had the Commonwealth Games representatives at the Sporting Institute last year, I made these points, and Michelle, David Lillage and I met them last week. This is something that needs to be addressed. We have internationally class sports stars who are not able to take part in competition because of sporting politics. It needs to be addressed. If it was a professional footballer, it would be addressed. If it was in the issue of golfers or whatever, because of the profile they have and being, of a professional status in terms of media attention and so on, it would be addressed because the media would drive it to be addressed. This has to be addressed because these sports are not elite sports in the sense that perhaps football is, or tennis is, or golf or whatever. Nevertheless, there are a significant number of people in Northern Ireland who are playing hockey and indeed rugby as well, and it needs to be addressed because our athletes in these sports are having equality denied to them, and equality delayed is equality denied.
I would just caveat what we've all agreed and said with the fact that athletes themselves, we're talking about hockey in particular here, but there are also individual athletes who choose and have a right to choose which governing body or which country, region that they will compete under. So we also will respect and take account of that.
And I accept absolutely that's a matter for the individual. As someone who supports the Northern Ireland football team, I've said before, I have difficulty with people playing up to play for the public, but that's their choice and their entitlement, and I defend their right to do it. What we're talking about here is athletes who have no choice. That's an entirely different issue, because they're being denied opportunity of playing in the competition entirely because of politics within that sport, because of a governing body.
It's good for the athletes themselves to have the opportunity. It's good for the sport because it raises the profile of the sport, and people do take an interest in how Northern Ireland does have a thing like the Commonwealth Games or whatever. And I think it's also good for the country because there's a sense of pride and morale about having a team or an individual from Northern Ireland up there on the podium, achieving something. And it promotes the image of Northern Ireland in a positive way rather than in a negative way, as so often happens. So there are all those pluses, and it's encouraging that it's been looked at I remember some years ago talking to folk from the hockey world, and there was an interest there amongst players for a whole range of reasons in terms of their own career development. In that regard, there wasn't progress made with some others, maybe on the administrative side at that time. But I think maybe we're in a better place now for that to happen. And
I think, Chairman, I have proven to the committee that I do in fact know who Ian Lures is, and so therefore those who were sceptical, like Mr McCrae, have accepted it. I was doing it to make a point.
Your knowledge is unparalleled.
Yes,
absolutely.
Thank you.
You an art table
Set a pretty high standard for the future, though. We'll just
right. Castle, please.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry I missed most of your presentation and another just there. Just briefly, Chair, the 300% increase over in those 10 years, 2001 to 11, was very much down to the efforts of clubs, of the governing bodies, of DKL, Sport NI, and indeed of the local councils. And I know that all the during my time in local council, that with the uncertainty around RPA, there was drives and moves to deliver as much as could be delivered on a local basis. I'm just wondering how well that is tied in with the setting up of the new council models, and how much you've tied in terms of that.
Well, I can cover the first bit in terms of the 300% increase. In 2000 and 2001, investment in sport was around £11.3 million. Investment in 2010 was around £33.5 million. The investment that we're talking about specifically is coming from exchequer funds and that of national lotteries. It does include investment being made by local government, for example. And it has demonstrated there's been a significant increase in doing that. There are a number of reasons. Obviously, lottery function within Sport in Ireland came into place in 1994, and then that, with increasing lottery sales, gave us more money to do what we wanted to do. And the second thing is, in 2006, we had the Melbourne Commonwealth Games. It was seen as a disaster by many in terms of sporting success, and during that time, the Assembly and many others got behind sport to invest monies that were required to make a difference. So that's probably two of the main reasons why monies were secured over the longer term.
I think in respect of the 11 district councils and actually other public bodies who are investing in sport, DSD, our chair will know, has invested a considerable amount in community sport during the last number of years. I think the opportunities and challenges for Sport NI and all of us with an interest in sport is in actually taking a more strategic approach to our intervention, building consensus as to where the sporting need is and how we actually fill those gaps. An example of how we actually worked with not the 26 councils that to some extent still exist, but the 11 clusters. 4 years ago, when we went out with active communities, Sport NI chose to work and negotiate working through 11 new clusters to put 117 active communities coaches on the ground. We got support from the 11 clusters for that, so we started working even 4 years ago on those clusters. We funded 100% the salaries of those coaches, and we give management costs also to the local council clusters to bring that forward. I think what we're doing now is bringing forward a facility strategy for Northern Ireland, of which we're providing 50% funding support. The new clusters, 11 clusters, are actually providing the other 50% together. And what we're trying to say is, let's all of us look at where's the deficit in sport in Northern Ireland, and let's all of us gain some consensus as to where we put priority funding, because funding is at a premium. We know that there's about a £300 million deficit from our previous figures, and we're just about to open a programme for £17.5 million. So we know that there's very little money. But this is about meaningful partnership. Everybody brings something to the table. But Sport NI recognises we need to get better in sitting down with our DSD colleagues, our DARD colleagues, and actually saying, here's the whole pot of money. This is your responsibility, this is ours. How can we work together to actually fill the gaps and meet the sporting need in a more strategic way?
Nobody would argue that there is still that need there. Some might trace it to some of the monies disappearing out of lottery monies during the whole Olympic period as well. But the sporting facility development is still required there, and that there seems to have been a hiatus in sort of passover from 26 to 11. There's actually one case, a very notorious reversal actually, but I'll not touch on that. But I do welcome 17.5 million that is coming through there, and. I say that as long as the need is required, when do you expect this strategy to be in place?
The facility strategy, there will be probably some lag between the consideration of projects coming forward for the capital investment and the final facility strategy. We're looking at it next spring, so that's our. And that's a means of us getting buy-in from everybody investing in sport to say, here's what is needed in Northern Ireland regionally, and here's what's needed at a localised level.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Karen McKellar.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks for your presentation this morning. Although I would have liked more time, I had a speed read. We didn't get much time to see this doc, but
apologies for that.
I will get reading it. Sport has come a long way for the women, and it would be remiss of me not to mention the Down Camogues last week, where I sat and took home the May Mills Cup. To my county, I represent, but also the ladies' football team this Sunday. We wish them all the best and hope to take the cup down the road to us. But I know that the sharing of facilities with men and women is a big obstacle.
Yeah.
I mean, when we have decisions still been made and taken to club rooms on whether they allow women to play, should it be golf or whatever else it has to be. So I think women and sports have come over many a hurdle, but there's still a lot of work to be done. What role do you see Sport NI playing in the shared facilities? I'm not just talking about the men and women, I'm talking about education, facilities, etc. the way it goes on.
And I think that's a vital component going forward in terms of sustaining a major investment in facilities in sport, because what we are recognising very clearly, and I think the recent recession has highlighted, that when we put a lot of money into one single sporting facility for one single sport, the sustainability is much, much more difficult than it is if we have multi-sport and community and higher performance use all coming together. We've seen really good models of that in the Bangor Pool, for example, where we've got high performance, but we've also got community use. And I think you raise a really interesting question in respect of are facilities fit for purpose in respect of men and women, and some of them are and some of them aren't. I know we've come a long way. I remember turning up at sports facilities at 15 years of age, and I had nowhere to use the bathroom, for example, because there were no women's loos there. So we have come a long way, but we still have a journey to come. And I'll give you an example. In boxing, we know now that boxing, female boxers have been allowed in the Commonwealth Games. We have seen the success of Katie Taylor in the last Olympics. That has brought an upsurge from working class communities and others in respect of boxing right across Northern Ireland. And one of the reasons we are investing hopefully around £3 million of lottery funding, this is additional lottery funding in boxing, is because the state of the facilities are so poor and the need is so great, and you will know these from some of your local communities, that they don't even have shower rooms, let alone shower rooms for boys and girls. And that's where we can, from our investment, look at how we can facilitate and actually encourage that.
Yeah, I think the point that you've made, I mean, we can get a silver medal at the Commonwealth Games when there's not even toilets for the men in our boxing clubs, which we have seen first-hand ourselves as a committee, any investment in any sport. But I mean, part of the what do you call it, spliss, is involved and to stay involved in the sport. Unless we invest heavily in our facilities, you're not encourage anybody to stay in the sport. I'm talking about from a local level, because that's where it all begins. It all begins at, should it be rural or city, it all begins local and stays local, really. Do you know what I mean? Right through the sport. So it's very important. So in your corporate plan, going forward, I think heavily investment in facilities right around, not just the boxing, but in other sports as well, and combine that, not just for the women, but for the men's facilities as well, because it's proven, like, we haven't got the facilities, but look at the professional athletes that we can take anywhere and sell the brand of this region around the world. If we had the proper facilities, where would we be in sport?
And Chair, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, but we are, at the minute, if I'm being really honest, managing huge expectations because we know we already have a reduced budget for next year. The lottery funding's been reduced as an impact of the £2 tickets. There's been a drop-off in sales. So we know that our income streams at both sides are under severe pressure. And we want to invest in community facilities that are of a high quality, that do exactly what you're saying, Karen, and that show people in Northern Ireland and local communities what good really looks like. But that means if we go for that model, we have less facilities. And I think, as Paul has demonstrated earlier, facilities is one element of the 9 pillars. We can't have fantastic facilities if we're not investing in the coaches, in terms of employing the coaches, in terms of training and nurturing and developing the coaches, in taking the volunteers along and training in them. So if we can't put all of our money into just the facilities, because we'll end up with ghost towns. We have to have all of the system, and that is the challenge for us, that holistic view.
But, well, I mean, you mentioned before about the involvement in the DARD and DSD's monies, and it is right across all departmental, even health. You could bring it in and the funding and what it brings. So, I mean, probably the sport is probably one of those that will bring everybody together, and that's something that I think needs a lot more work on.
I couldn't agree more.
As well.
I couldn't agree more, and I think all three of us today are saying the need for that joined up and more effort into joined up is absolutely vital.
But I would even go as far as Daddy as well. Do you know what I mean? Because the sports and the tourism end has opened a door here that we probably never would have seen for successes in and around golf, fishing, etc. So I mean, there's doors and stuff to be opened there that hopefully the budget cuts won't be as bad as we think, hopefully, because it's needed.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Your optimism is impressive.
Thank you.
And just to say, Chair, we're working with the Northern Ireland Tourist Board across a whole range of events. We're sitting in partnership with them and working through funding. So I would be remiss of me not to say that in recognition of the Tourist Board's role as well.
Yeah, thank you. Alderman McMullen.
Yes, Chair, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. As usual, very enjoyable. Can I go back to a more local grassroots scenario? I do believe that getting people involved in sports needs to get them involved at an early age or at the local level. And now with the new councils being set up, councils are the main providers of sports facilities in most areas, and in fact nearly all areas. And it's disappointing to read that only 2 or 3 of them are accredited to deal with sports and that accreditation, and the rest of them haven't bothered to go into that. So that's a worry as well, if the biggest provider of sports facilities isn't bothered to put out. But on the disability special needs sport, I congratulate you on it, on the good work that you do there. There's a lot of work goes on that's not seen and heard about. But I think if we look more at the councils in providing facilities or improving facilities that they already have, and encouraging more people to participate in the sport, especially women there, even women with families that want to come back into the sport, which hasn't been mentioned today yet, which is vitally important. And I do believe it's all to do with their appearance, their figures and everything else that's putting them off. But a lot of the ones want to go back into the sport again. But if we don't have the facilities near them, that's going to put them off. There's a lot of private people started up and doing a good job, you know. But I think we need to be getting the councils to play their part. And really, you nearly hit on it there. Some of the councils that I was 22 years in council, and quite honestly, some of the council facilities have not improved nearly in 22 years. You nearly know blindfolded where you're going to go and what to have. They haven't improved them. We're seeing more outdoor facilities now for sport, equipment, etc. But the other thing I would like to say, I'd be scared of going down this road if we're looking at some of the sports and their participation or non-participation in major competitions like Commonwealth Games or whatever. If we look at it from being a political issue, that the organisations could be political, I think that could possibly create a divide. I think you could maybe look at that there from another angle, that the organisations themselves there should be a lot of dialogue started to get over that. Because if we go out there and talk politics, that's going to end up. We've seen that time and time again, and we don't have to remind anybody on that. But can I say, just on behalf of the disability special needs, I congratulate you all on what you are doing there. We're always looking for more to be done.
And so are we.
But I think this committee here has a role to play, and if we can do anything on that there, I'd be very much, I think we should be doing it. But councils, work on the councils, because believe you me, they have a major role to play, because even GA clubs now are working with hockey, working with rugby, they're working with everyone. To see the benefit of that now in rural areas, it used to be single sport, but now we're encompassing all the sports in rural areas from all everywhere, and it's really working. They all complement each other. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Basil?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Is the decal strategy for sports, is that still Sports Matters? So that was 2009-2019, and one of the things that it calls for is to stop the decline in adult participation and to increase female participation by 6 percentage points. How are we doing?
We're on track to achieve that. Just to go back, Basil, this Sport Matters is a 10-year strategy. We're now halfway through the implementation of the strategy. A review against the targets within the strategy is currently being undertaken by the department, so we'll have a more accurate position on that in the next month or so. But in terms of how we're doing, we're on track to achieve the 2019 target to increase the percentage of women involved in sport. To stop the decline has already been achieved.
Would just help me if you. What was the participation of women? What was the baseline? Do you remember?
Not offhand, but it's around 44% from memory.
There was a presentation to a Westminster committee by the Women's Sport and Fitness Foundation, and they reported that women at the age of 14 have a participation rate in sport of 12%, whereas boys is 25%. Would we have any similar figures or analysis? What is our participation levels like at school age?
In terms of participation in sport in school and outside of school, up to the age of between the age of 11 and 13, it's quite good, and that's around 96%, and that's of a survey called the Young People's Behaviour and Attitude Survey, and that's often the opportunities are provided within the school environment and outside of the school environment.
See, I find those figures strange given what's put forward in Westminster, and if I could just quote what the female chair of the Women's Sport and Fitness Foundation said to the committee in Westminster. She said for young women to do a sport when their mates are not, the chances are that they will be viewed with some suspicion. And actually she goes on to say a few other things which I won't quote, but I have to say I'm surprised at the figure that you gave, because I would notice that there is less of a participation of young women in sport at formative years.
That's the case. There are two figures I gave. One was related to adult participation, which is 16 plus, and the other I gave was in relation to children who were surveyed in the school environment, and that's 11 to 16-year-olds.
And the figure was for the 11 to 16?
It's 98%, but I think it's 97 for boys and 96 for girls.
See, those are the figures, but it just
Again, it's in the research paper.
Just doesn't seem correct to me. But we can maybe have a look at it again. Some other figures from the lifestyle study in Northern Ireland. Men and women that are a member of at least one sporting club. The figure for men is 31%, and the figure for women is 13%. It seems that seems an issue that we'd want to attract as well.
And I think this is back to an issue of, there's clear disparity there, but there's also an issue of how women participate in maintaining a healthy, active lifestyle. I don't have the figures in my head, but when you remove walking as a sport as such, the numbers for women just completely plummet. So there's a lot of women who are active but don't have the time to be an active, sustained member of a club, but they will go out cycling, they will go out running, they will go out walking, because their life and caring responsibilities and work doesn't always lend itself to them being an active member of a club. It doesn't necessarily say they're not participating in sport. They're quite often involved in sport that isn't linked directly to form a club structure.
So if your strategy, which I heard from Angela, whatever was given out, was that the way to increase participation is better coaching, better role models, if you're only getting 13% of women actually involved in such formal structures, how do you bridge that gap?
Well, this is back to participation, and we're looking in Sport NI, but the continuum or the flow from participation into structured, sustained sport for those who want to move into that, and for those who then move into structured, sustained sport and see that they're really good at it, that they move into the higher performance. So it's that continuum flow. Well, we want to maintain people, sustain people participating in sport. That's what our Active Communities programme was directly aimed at doing, and we have actually succeeded our target there in relation to women representation.
If I could say to you, there's two elephants in the room, and what I mentioned, so it's pretty crowded, so this is the first elephant.
Okay.
Sport is viewed as being predominantly a male occupation or a male issue. And you've said to me, women do engage in activity, but they do it in a less formal, more ad hoc way of doing it.
Some women.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Some women. So, but this is the key. Is it? You know, you're talking here statistics, numbers, and all this, and I tell you, I don't see a change yet, apart from a few stars where you go, that's great, and she do very well. You know, and I'm not being disparaging. I'm just saying, I don't think that we've really tackled the issue about getting women to realise that sport is for everybody. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
To give you an example, Basil, in relation to what it's like in a governing body from that perspective, and I agree with you, there's a challenge for us as a sport. I can only speak from hockey's perspective, that we find our drop-off is the age of 15 onwards. We've got a significant investment in terms of our grassroots participation of youth programmes, and it's a challenge for all governing bodies in terms of retention. How you retain young girls beyond that age of 15. And I would agree with Paul's statistics. We actually have growth up to the age of 15 in terms of our numbers. But the challenge then is, what do we do with the 15-year-old, the 16-year-old, the 17-year-old to retain them in the sport and then get them into the adult structure? I agree with you in terms of looking at what we're trying to do through our Club Mark programme and our club development system, is to try and then engage women into roles within those organisations in terms of clubs, so then we can still keep them involved, whether that's as a secretary or administrator or
if I could ask you a specific question in this, Chair, because I know a wee bit about the background. I may have got the wrong. I only quoted 14 because that was the statistic, but it is at 16 or something like that. But you and Lindsay McVicker.
Many years ago now, yeah.
Well, but I know the McVickers. I know Moira. She would have been an international hockey player as well. So there's sporting families that do it. So I don't know if it, but you actually have, if it's in your family culture to do it, then you do it. But if you don't,
I think I agree with you. I grew up with a sporting family, albeit my sport was football initially, and I agree in terms of the McVickers as well. It's a very long list of international experience. I think the challenge in terms of all clubs in that respect is that I'm not speaking about women in particular, but women do have other roles and responsibilities within that lifestyle. It's about the club understanding the lifestyle, and trying to engage them back in, and looking at my own former club, Balmoney, in terms of the work that they're trying to do. They are encouraging the mums and tots. They've got programmes for mums and tots that they can come along, tea and coffee in the morning, get out on the pitch with their own young players to actually encourage them back in. So it's about staying in, coaching roles, supporting roles in terms of administration. There's still work to be done in that from my sport in particular, and I think strategically across all sports, there's still room to be done on that.
Yeah, and I'm just finishing that point, just because the second presentation was on the elite sports bit, which might come back in, but just for my clarity, is it, I do still think you have a bit of work to do, which I think you accept, on that issue of understanding other factors and be interested in that. If I moved on to the issue about the elite sports, there was an answer in response to Mr McMullen's question, or he was making a statement about being political. See, I do think that elite sports is already political. You can't get away from it, that we don't know what flag to walk behind, we don't know what anthem to play, we don't know which team to be part of. I mean, is there anything that you can do to help us resolve this this issue? I remember persuading an international Irish rugby player to stand for council, and Tyrone has never spoken to me since. He said, "Look, I'm a sportsman." He says, "I don't care whether it's GAA, this, that, and the other. But there must be something that our sporting fraternity can do to at least accept there is a political issue here and maybe lead us out of it."
And I think there's huge work has already been done by GAA rugby and football in Northern Ireland to actually find common issues that unite us more than actually divide us. And Sport NI is currently conducting some research in terms of how we capture that. Learning includes of what works in sport in terms of good relations, what hasn't worked so well, so we can learn from that as well, and what's more to do. And I think it's back, Basil, to what we talked about earlier. We are in a very, very unique position in Northern Ireland where some of our athletes compete for Ireland, some of them compete for Northern Ireland, and some of them compete for the United Kingdom or GB. That's a matter for their choice, for some of the athletes, notwithstanding what the discussion we had in point of what you raised, William. So it's not a matter for Sport NI to dictate what flag or what anthem people stand for. I think
but maybe there is a discussion had to be, because William's point was where you don't have a choice. You can clearly, you can clearly commit a move, and I accept that because William brought it to my attention. I didn't know this. You have to leave it, but there are some other issues which I see sports people doing good work with bringing together. I just think you should take the lead on it. And if I last point on this, because it just finishes up on that point. Don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes we have to challenge some things. You in your opening statement, said we've our most successful medal haul from the Commonwealth Games since, was it 86?
Yes, in Edinburgh.
But 9 out of the 12 were boxing. And I was in Glasgow for almost 10 days, and I cheered on any Northern Ireland person. There was one person, I'm sorry I've forgotten his name, he was knowledgeable, who did really well in the triathlon. And so I'm coming away, he came in 6th or something like that, which I thought was fantastic. But the other 2 guys were like lapping everybody. He was still there. So I'm not sure that we're right in telling people, look how well we did, because our participation in the Olympic Games was restricted to, or in the Commonwealth Group was restricted to boxing, judo and bowls.
And I think that's a really fair point to make. I mean, before going to the Commonwealth Games, I just want to say I hope, Basil, that some of the work that we're now doing with Gaelic rugby, football and indeed boxing governing bodies and identifying what works in United Communities and what doesn't and what's more to do will help to demonstrate that we are trying to show some leadership and not shy away from those issues. And we're more than happy to come back and present that work to you. We'd be delighted to. I think you're absolutely right in the Commonwealth Games. We had a very successful Commonwealth Games in respect of medals. but it was skewed towards one sport, and we have publicly recognised that. I think we had some also personal bests that we can't lose, because this is about a pathway to performance, and how do we actually use the personal bests to actually achieve better next time. We also had the Northern Ireland netball team, because the Commonwealth Games sets the world ranking for netball, came into the Commonwealth Games having not succeeded in qualifying for the World Champions. So that was a real down for them. They came out of that 7th ranked in the world, and you had to be part of the top 10 in the world to qualify for World Champions. They beat Wales hands down. So I don't want sport in Northern Ireland to lose that success either. But let me get back to the medals and say to you that we are currently beginning a review of the Commonwealth Games. We are talking to every single governing body in respect of coming up to the Games, what worked for them in terms of the preparation for it, what didn't work, what Sport NI and the governing bodies have done less of more, better to actually improve performance.
If I just said one sentence to it, which is, if you are looking to bring elite sports people as role models for other things, we do need to address the deficiency in this model, and there are certain elephants in the room that you do have to, or some, not you necessarily, but somebody has to address, and until you address them, it's pretty hard to move forward. And all I'd say to you is I really look forward to your review coming back up. I'm not detain you any further on it, but I think a certain amount of constructive honesty about situations. Because I tell you, I even cheered the women's 100-metre swimmers that got disqualified, you know, and then you get back in. It was great that they were there doing their best and so eager, you know, whatever. So there's something there for you to do it, and it's not about massaging figures. Not that you would, but I'm just saying that we need to confront the goodness.
Yeah.
I'm not finishing.
And Chair, I think we totally agree with that. I think Sinai Sports Institute has been brought in-house to Sport Northern Ireland, so we have a real opportunity to look at those pathways to performance and bring people the whole way. Sport NI produced a very honest review of Melbourne in 2007, so we're used to doing honest reports at high performance level. Angela will tell us will tell us all that high performing athletes here on a weekly, daily basis where they're not performing, it's expected of their coaches and of their support staff to give it to them. The review of the Commonwealth Games will include those discussions with the athletes. It will also look to say that the Commonwealth Games Council for Northern Ireland do a fantastic job. It's a really challenging job, but if they may wish to bring X amount of athletes to the Commonwealth Games, Sport NI may have to say, in terms of international high performance and that bar, you might want to bring 80 athletes to the Commonwealth Games. We might decide that we're working with 50 because that's where we believe we can win the medals. I think that's the type of discussion that Sinai is starting to have. And again, we're happy to bring that report back, and we will publicise the medals that we're hoping to get for the Gold Coast. We're going to be very open and transparent about that, and I agree wholeheartedly, Basil, with what you're saying.
Thanks, Basil. Thank you for the two presentations and for the responses and engagement around the questions as well. And there's a number of issues that were raised there that I'm sure we'll come back to. And I know there are things that you're obviously working on, and review of DECAL themselves looking at the Sports Matters review at the moment, so there's quite a lot of business in there. We would perhaps like to hold a meeting at the House of Sport, and if members are agreeable to that, and to use that maybe as a base to visit sports facilities there at the Dub and Newforge Lane. So that would be an opportunity to have our meeting.
Absolutely delighted. Thank you very much.
And I think the officials will liaise with you then about the timing of that and we'll see about things. So thank you again.
Thanks a million.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Correspondence? That brings us just to one other item on the agenda, and that's correspondence there. There's, first of all, the Investment Strategy Implementation Report to July 2014, which is at page 228, and the Implementation Report to June 2014, which is at page 236. And the projects in there you might wish to note are the redevelopment of the University of Ulster, which incorporates Belfast Central Library redevelopment, the redevelopment of Liston Ski Library at approximately £1.5 million, and then the redevelopment of the sports stadium. Members can tend to note that. Also then, finally, the Programme for Government 2011 to 15 progress reports at page 238.
Chair, can I just highlight to members there are 3 decal items that are reported on at numbers 14, 63 and 64. I'll just give a very quick précis of that. 14 is the targets for the Creative Industries Innovation Fund. That is on target for the 200 projects overall by the end of this financial year. 63 is the stadia redevelopment, and it just restates the current planning issue that there is with Casement Park, but that others are on track. And 64 relates to the World Police and Fire Games, and that's a completed action because obviously the Games has now taken place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You also note there the decal findings report from the Young Persons Behaviour and Attitude Survey 2013, which is at page 270. The report presents findings from the 2013 survey carried out amongst 11 to 17-year-olds, and 75% of young people surveyed participate in arts activities, as down from 79% in 2010. So if you're agreeable to include that as evidence to the inquiry report. And that brings us to the committee end of session report 2013-14. That's at page 304. And Clark, please.
Chair, this is the annual end of session report that members will be familiar with. We produce one of these every year. It gives a reflection on committee activity, outputs and so on. This is the report back for the session that has just gone, including an annex at the end on spending. What we're looking for is members' approval for this, and then all of the end of session reports will go together for each of the committees onto the website. So members may even want to take that away with them and have a look at it, and we'll bring it back again next week, and then we'll seek approval then.
Okay, thank you. Then, Chairperson's business. 2 items there. The invite from the Education Committee regarding the STEM in Action event on the 1st of October in the Lawn Gallery, and that's being run by Sentinus. So if anybody is planning to attend, please let the committee office team know that. And also then the correspondence to the Lyric Theatre in the table pack, the invitation there to attend a main stage performance. Programme is at the top table today. See it. And will be held in the committee office and online as well. So if you want to attend a performance, please again inform the committee. Getting near the end here, the forward work programme. That's at page 321. Bart, please.
Chair, we've pinned down our itinerary for the visit to Dublin and Swords next week, which is in front of members in hard copy. So if you please take that with you. If I boil it down to a key question, there'll be a bus leaving here at 3:30 on the Wednesday. What we want to pin down is who's going to be able to make that bus, who's going to be taking their own car down, and who needs to definitely get us to book the train. Okay, so the bus will leave next Wednesday from here at 3:30. We expect to return up here for 4 o'clock on the Thursday. But this gives the itinerary. We'll be emailing this out to everyone just to establish those who are participating what exactly the particular mode of transport is, or if you let Jonathan or Malcolm know on the way out of the meeting. And just to remind members, it's a joint visit with the Environment Committee.
Okay. So there's no actual committee meeting next week because of the visit to Swords. That brings me to... Oh yes, yeah. Sorry? Oh right, okay. That's fine. Do members have any other business? No. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, yes, sorry, apologies, sorry. My mistake, Mr Page there, and also to say, we've been able to get the room here booked for next Monday for the presentation about the October monitoring. Yeah, that's what we're going to come to. There are a number of debates on, and there's also then oral questions. If you're minded, because some people may be on committees where the Justice Committee or so on, they'll be asking questions. If we fit it in during one of the debates, so avoiding that 2 to 3:30 slot for questions, would that be okay?
Do we want to say 3:30?
3:30? Put it after that.
3:30?
3:30.
We circulate an email on that. So, Jonathan, if we go for 3.
And details there. Next meeting is room 21, 9th of October at 10 a.m. And the Minister will brief the committee on the departmental business plan, and we've also got disability sport NI. Okay, thank you.
We are adjourned.